Henosis is the ancient Neoplatonic concept of mystical union with the One, the ultimate ineffable source beyond being, form, and thought. It is not a belief, but an experience, a dissolving of the separate self into a silent, all-encompassing unity where identity, time, and division vanish. Henosis is not about understanding the divine, it is about becoming it. To approach the One is to move inward, downward, and beyond all structures the mind clings to. Thought becomes a veil. Language becomes a prison. Even goodness and truth become distractions. The One is not reached by adding more knowledge, but by stripping everything away. Henosis. This terrifying beauty of Henosis lies in what it demands. It asks for surrender, not just of ego, but of reason, desire, and the need to be anyone at all. It is a death of separateness. Those who touched it spoke of a silence that vibrated more powerfully than sound, a stillness that felt more alive than movement. It is the moment the flame realizes it was never separate from the fire. In Henosis, the soul does not worship the divine, it disappears into it. The self becomes the cosmos, the body becomes the sky, the breath becomes eternity. It is not enlightenment through light, but through annihilation. A vanishing, a return. Few ever reach it. Fewer still return with words. But those who do are never the same. Something in them has burned away, and what remains speaks softly, moves gently, and belongs to everything, even the silence. Apophasis. Apophasis is the path of knowing by unknowing, a philosophy so strange and unsettling that it unravels the very idea of truth itself. Rooted in ancient mystical traditions and sharpened by Neoplatonic thought, Apophasis teaches that the highest truths cannot be spoken, only hinted at by what they are not. It is the radical act of peeling away every word, every image, every definition, until what remains is not a thing, but an absence, so pure, so absolute that only silence can hold it. To understand through apophasis is to abandon certainty. It is to say, God is not light, not love, not being, not good, not anything we can imagine or name. Every label reduces, every metaphor distorts. The moment something is spoken, it becomes smaller than what it tries to describe. And so, the wise do not speak of the divine in affirmations. They approach it through negation. This is not ignorance. It is reverent refusal, a sacred dismantling. There is pain in this path. It is not the comfort of clarity, but the agony of letting go. The ego screams in the face of the unknown. The mind panics when stripped of symbols. But apophasis is not nihilism. It is a fierce devotion to what words cannot touch. In the emptiness, something vast and luminous waits, unspoken, untouched, yet more real than anything the senses could grasp. The mystic who walks this road doesn't find God. He loses everything else. What's left is not an answer, but a silence that burns like truth. Logos Spermatikos. Logos Spermatikos is the haunting idea that reason itself is divine, and that its seeds are scattered across the fabric of the universe. The Stoics believed that the cosmos was not random, not chaotic, but permeated with logos, a living, breathing principle of order and intelligence. Within this logos were tiny seeds of rationality, spermatikos logoi, implanted into everything that exists. Every tree that reaches for sunlight, every star that holds its orbit, every human thought that seeks understanding. They are all echoes of a divine logic humming beneath the surface of things. This concept doesn't merely describe nature. It suggests that the universe is trying to become conscious of itself through us. That human reason isn't a fluke, but a flame passed down from the gods. When a person thinks clearly, when they act with justice, when they align with nature's harmony, they aren't just being moral. They're awakening something ancient within themselves. They are letting the seed unfold. But seeds don't bloom by default. They require struggle, discipline, fire. Most remain dormant, choked by passion, fear, and noise. The tragedy is that a person can live an entire life asleep, never knowing that something divine was curled inside them, waiting to awaken. Logos. Spermatikos is both a blessing and a demand. It whispers that destiny is not imposed from above. It grows from within. And to ignore it is not just to waste a life, but to silence the voice of the universe that wanted to think through you. Theurgy. Theurgy is the forbidden art of calling the gods, not to worship them, but to become them. It is not religion as comfort. It is not prayer as submission. Theurgy is fire, ritual, danger. Born in the shadows of late Neoplatonism, it teaches that divine union is not achieved through thought alone, but through sacred acts that pierce the veil between human and eternal. To the Theurgist, the universe is alive with symbols. Every star, every sound, every movement has meaning. Rituals are not empty performances. They are codes, keys. When performed with precision, purity, and knowledge, they unlock the divine currents that flow beneath matter. Theurgy is the belief that the soul, buried in flesh and forgetfulness, can rise, can awaken, through divine contact. It is not magic for power, but magic for transformation. But this path is not gentle. Theurgy demands discipline, secrecy, purification. The body must be prepared. The heart must be emptied. The mind must be stilled. Only then can the soul endure the intensity of what it dares to summon. Fire may descend. Visions may come. Time may collapse. One risks not just revelation, but annihilation. And yet, those who practice it speak of moments where the boundaries blur, where man is no longer man, but vessel. Voice, light. They become what they invoke. For a breathless instant, they are no longer reaching for the divine. They are the divine, gazing back at the world through human eyes. And when that moment ends, they return marked, touched by something that cannot be undone. Emanationism. Emanationism is the ancient and unsettling vision that all of reality flows from a single, infinite source, not by choice, not by effort, but by necessity, like light radiating from the sun or heat bleeding from a flame. In this view, the universe was not made, it spilled. The One, in its perfection, overflows, and from that overflow comes all things: gods, souls, matter, time. This is not creation with a plan. There is no blueprint, no divine architect bending will into form. There is only an eternal descent, a cascade of being, where each level is a dimmer echo of the one above it. The one gives birth to the divine mind. The mind births the soul. The soul births the world. Each layer loses something. Each step down is a forgetting. And we, trapped in the lowest realms, are shadows of shadows, wandering far from our origin. Yet the ache in us, that hunger for meaning, for unity, for return, is the proof that we still remember. Buried beneath sensation, beneath ego and thought, something in us still longs for the light. Emanationism says this longing is not delusion. It is direction. To live is to fall, but to awaken is to rise. Not by climbing, but by turning inward, toward the source from which we fell. The tragedy of emanation is beauty itself. Everything we love, form, color, motion, music, is a distortion of something purer. Every joy we taste is a diluted echo, and yet in that echo, the voice of the One still sings. Noûs. Noûs is not simply mind. It is the mind behind the universe. In ancient philosophy, especially in the teachings of Anaxagoras and Plotinus, Noûs is the divine intellect that structures all things, the invisible architect behind stars, seasons, and souls. It is not personal like a god, nor abstract like a law. It is intelligence itself, eternal and unchanging, radiating order into the chaos of matter. Noûs is the reason the world makes sense, the reason a seed knows how to become a tree, the reason truth feels different than a lie, even when no one is watching. It is the cosmic blueprint that every form unconsciously follows, the pure thought that reality imitates. To the ancients, Noûs was not just a metaphysical idea, it was the source of meaning itself. To align with Noûs is to awaken. It is the moment when the soul, long drunk on sensation and pleasure, begins to remember its origin. In Plato's vision, Noûs is what the soul saw before birth, truth in its naked form, unfiltered by the senses. In Plotinus's vision, Noûs is the second great emanation from the One, filled with perfect forms, beyond desire, beyond change. But here is the terror. The more we remember Noûs, the less the world of distraction satisfies. The soul begins to ache, not for pleasure, but for clarity, not for stimulation, but for stillness. And in rare, silent moments, when thought becomes pure and undivided, Noûs is no longer something we seek. It is something we are. The mind finally recognizes itself in the structure of the stars. Hypostasis. Hypostasis is the ancient scaffolding of reality, the layers of being that cascade down from the unspeakable source known only as the One. In the Neoplatonic vision, existence is not a flat field, but a great vertical descent from absolute unity into multiplicity. The One is pure silence, beyond all thought, but from it flows Noûs, the divine mind. From Noûs flows Psyche, the world's soul, and from Psyche, the material world takes form. These layers are not separate, they are reflections, each more fragmented than the last. Hypostasis is not just metaphysical theory. It is a map of exile, a diagnosis of why the soul feels so far from home. At the top, all is still, whole, perfect. At the bottom, here, we feel scattered, lost, driven by hunger and noise. We live in shadows of shadows, having forgotten the brilliance from which we fell. But hypostasis also whispers a way back, not through addition, but subtraction, not through invention, but remembrance. Each level of reality holds less light, more division. And yet, within each is a thread, a memory of what came before. In dreams, in art, in sudden moments of overwhelming peace, the soul glimpses upward, up through the psyche to the Noûs, and finally toward the One. But that highest realm is not reached by climbing. It is reached by letting go of everything that clings to identity. To grasp hypostasis is to feel the world differently. Trees become echoes, people become reflections, and silence becomes a doorway. What appears solid begins to shimmer, revealing itself as the last ripple of a light that never speaks. Monad. The monad is not a thing. It is not a god. It is not a place. It is the unspeakable origin behind everything, an indivisible, infinite presence from which all of existence spills without division or intent. To the ancient philosophers, especially the Neoplatonists and Pythagoreans, the monad was the absolute one, so perfect, so whole, so self-contained that it had no need to act, to think, or to be known. It simply was. From it came everything, yet it never changed. It birthed the cosmos not through desire, but through necessity. Imagine a silence so complete it gives rise to sound, a stillness so infinite it gives birth to motion. The monad is that still point before duality, before light and dark, before self and other. It is not one among many. It is oneness itself, before number even begins. Beneath gods, beneath time, beneath thought, there is only the monad, pulsing behind the veil of all appearances. And yet, its purity is terrifying. The closer one moves toward it, the more everything begins to unravel. Identity, meaning, boundaries. The soul that dares approach the monad must pass through fire. It must abandon everything it clings to, for nothing imperfect can stand in the presence of such absolute simplicity. No name can hold it. No image can reflect it. It is beyond being, yet the ground of all being. Those who glimpse it return changed, haunted, humbled, silenced. Because to touch the monad is to remember that beneath the chaos of life there is only one thing, and it is not a thing. Anamnesis. Anamnesis is the ancient and unnerving idea that learning is not discovery, it is remembering. According to Plato, the soul has seen everything before: truth, beauty, justice, even the divine itself. Before birth, the soul lived in a realm of perfect forms, bathing in eternal knowledge. But birth is not a beginning, it is a forgetting. The moment the soul enters the body, it forgets everything it knew. Life becomes a dim echo, the senses distract, the world seduces, and the soul, now trapped in flesh, begins to hunger for something it can't name. That hunger, for meaning, for depth, for understanding, is the first whisper of anamnesis. When a person encounters truth and feels a strange familiarity, a sacred déjà vu, it is not because they are learning something new. It is because something ancient inside them is waking up. The soul is remembering. This is why philosophy is not a science of facts. It is a path of return. Socrates did not teach answers. He midwifed memories. Through dialogue and questioning, he stripped away illusion until the soul began to recall what it always knew. Truth, then, is not found by looking outward, but by turning inward, beyond the noise, into that buried place where the eternal still echoes. Anamnesis means that wisdom isn't earned, it's recovered. Every spark of insight is a crack in the prison wall. Every moment of recognition is a glimpse beyond the veil. And every soul, no matter how lost, still carries within it the whole of heaven, waiting to be remembered. Enkrateia. Enkrateia is not strength. It is not discipline. It is not willpower as we often imagine it. Gritted teeth, forced restraint, temporary control. Enkrateia is something far deeper and more terrifying. The total mastery of the self by the self. It is when desire no longer pulls, anger no longer flares, fear no longer directs. It is when the storm dies because there is no wind left to move it. To the ancients, especially the Stoics and early Platonists, Enkrateia was the beginning of true freedom. Without it, a man is a slave, even if he owns empires. Without it, a woman can speak of virtue while being led by every unexamined impulse inside her. The untrained soul is not just weak, it is possessed, owned by emotion, consumed by pleasure, commanded by fear. Enkrateia is the slow, painful revolt against that possession. It begins in silence. In that moment before action, when the body twitches with habit and the mind screams for indulgence. Enkrateia is the voice that says, no. Not because it must, but because it can. It is not repression. It is clarity. To know what burns inside and not let it steer. To feel the pull of addiction, rage, lust, grief, and remain unmoved, still, awake. This is not Stoic detachment. It is spiritual dominance. The soul becoming its own ruler, no longer bribed by comfort or threatened by pain. Few attain it. Fewer live it. But those who do walk through chaos untouched, like fire that does not burn because the battlefield has moved inward, and they've already won. Hylomorphism. Hylomorphism is the ancient doctrine that everything in the physical world is made of two inseparable elements, matter and form. It is not enough to know what something is made of. One must also understand what it is meant to be. To the Aristotelian mind, matter is the raw potential, the clay, the wood, the flesh. But form is the invisible pattern, the soul, the structure that makes a thing what it is. Without matter, form is an empty idea. Without form, matter is pure chaos. This concept was more than metaphysics. It was a challenge to the way humans see reality. In a world obsessed with surfaces, hylomorphism whispers that substance alone means nothing. A block of marble is not a statue until the sculptor's vision gives it shape. A body is not a person until a soul animates it. Every tree, every tool, every thought is a marriage of what exists and what it strives to become. What makes this idea so haunting is that it applies not just to objects, but to people. A human is not merely bones and blood, but purpose embedded in flesh. Strip away the form, the dignity, the direction, the spirit, and what's left is not fully human. And yet, form cannot float free. It must live in the body, move through time, suffer limitation. Hylomorphism reminds us that we are neither machine nor ghost, but something in between. A strange fusion of dust and design, earth and essence, endlessly becoming what we already are. Metaxy. Metaxy is the aching truth that to be human is to live suspended between two worlds, never fully divine, never fully beast, caught in the unbearable tension of both. The ancient philosopher Plato spoke of this in-between as the very essence of the human condition. Metaxy is the middle space, between ignorance and wisdom, between mortality and eternity, between flesh and spirit. It is not a flaw. It is the battlefield where the soul is forged. We are born reaching toward meaning, toward love, toward the divine, but always with feet planted in dust and decay. This is why joy feels fleeting, why beauty breaks our hearts, why truth always seems just out of reach. We glimpse the higher, but cannot live there. We descend into the lower, but cannot belong there. Metaxy is not peace, it is yearning. It is the wound of being aware enough to dream of more, yet limited enough to keep falling short. To live in metaxy is to carry contradiction inside your bones, to laugh while grieving, to believe while doubting, to desire purity while drowning in impulse. The soul remembers something perfect, but is wrapped in a body that forgets. And every day becomes a negotiation between the two. But this in-between is not weakness. It is the fire where transformation becomes possible. In the tension between opposites, the human being is stretched, torn, awakened. Metaxy is the exile that teaches us to seek, the absence that proves the presence, the hunger that reveals the feast. It is the proof that we were made for more, and the agony of knowing we haven't yet become it. Pneuma. Pneuma is the breath that animates the universe, not just air, not just wind, but the invisible force that gives life, movement, and intelligence to all things. To the Stoics, it was the divine fire that pulses through every living being, the sacred thread that connects the body to the soul, the cosmos to consciousness. Pneuma is what makes a corpse different from a man. It is the shimmer in the eye, the warmth in the chest, the silent presence that leaves without warning when death comes. But pneuma is not ours. It flows through us, not from us. It enters at birth, exits at death, and belongs to something far greater. It fills the world like breath fills lungs. Every rock, tree, and animal carries a portion of it, though in different strengths. In humans, pneuma becomes logos, reason, morality, self-awareness. And yet even reason is not a possession. It is a flame borrowed from the stars. This belief was not poetic metaphor. It was felt in the bones. To live rightly was to honor pneuma within, to live in accordance with nature, to breathe in harmony with the cosmos itself. When one strayed into vice, chaos, or selfishness, they were said to be choking the pneuma, clouding the inner fire that made them human. The tragedy is how easy it is to forget. In the noise of life, the breath becomes shallow. The spirit dims, but it is always there, quiet, constant, waiting. Every moment of clarity, of virtue, of stillness is not an achievement. It is the pneuma remembering itself. Epopteia. Epopteia is the final unveiling, the moment when the veil drops, and the soul sees what it was never meant to forget. In the ancient mystery schools of Greece, it was the climax of initiation, the deepest layer of sacred experience, and the point of no return. Those who reached Epopteia didn't just learn a secret, they became it. They didn't just witness truth, they dissolved into it. Words failed here. Language collapsed. What happened in that vision could never be spoken, not because it was forbidden, but because the human tongue was too small to carry it. To reach Epopteia, the initiate passed through death, not physical, but symbolic. They were stripped, broken, buried in ritual darkness. Then, in a moment orchestrated with divine precision, the light came. Not the light of fire or sun, but the inner light that had waited behind their eyes all along. What they saw was not taught. It was remembered. A vision so overwhelming that many wept, screamed, or stood in silent awe. They did not see gods. They were seen by them. Epopteia was not just a religious rite. It was a spiritual rebirth. After it, nothing tasted the same. The world shimmered with hidden depth. The mundane became sacred. Life became a symbol, and death became a return. Those who experienced it carried a calm terror, a kind of silent knowing that beneath all the masks of life there is something watching, something real. And for one impossible moment, they had seen it face to face. Crisis. Crisis is not mere crisis. It is the knife-edge moment when everything hidden is forced into the light. In ancient philosophy, crisis meant judgment, not legal sentencing, but a cosmic dividing line, a sacred reckoning where truth cuts through illusion. It is the moment the soul is measured, the hour when masks fall away and what is real stands alone, trembling in its own light. In medicine, crisis marked the turning point, life or death. In philosophy, it is no different. It is the storm that breaks the false self, the silence that follows a lie exposed. To the ancients, crisis was not chaos, it was clarity, not punishment, but purification. When the universe enters crisis, it does not destroy, it reveals. It separates what pretends from what is, the just from the unjust, the essential from the empty. It doesn't come with warning. It arrives like a sudden wind, a word spoken at the wrong time, a decision that splits a life in two, a truth so sharp it wounds before it heals. But crisis does not seek our comfort. It seeks our alignment. It is the soul's confrontation with itself, the trembling moment where choice becomes destiny, not because of what we say, but because of what we are. In a world flooded with noise, crisis is the voice that cannot be silenced. And when it comes, there is no place to hide, only to stand, only to answer, only to become, at last, who we truly are. No more pretending, no more delay, no more time. Chôra is the silent womb of the universe, the formless, shapeless space that receives all things yet belongs to none. In Plato's Timaeus, it is described not as a thing, not as a being, but as a ghostly third presence that exists before form, before mind, before even creation itself. It is the invisible canvas onto which reality is painted, yet it leaves no trace of the brush. It does not create. It allows creation to happen through it. To grasp Chôra is to step into a space that the intellect cannot hold. It is not matter, but it holds matter. It is not mind, but it reflects mind. It is the nowhere that makes everywhere possible, like a shadow that has no substance, yet without it, nothing else could cast light. The ancients feared it, revered it, avoided naming it directly, because Chôra is chaos before order, mystery before meaning. It is the dark ocean from which the gods rise, the echoing silence before Logos speaks, the trembling stillness where nothing yet exists. But everything is possible. It is feminine in nature, not by gender, but by role. Passive, yes, but profound. It doesn't act, it lets. To meditate on Chôra is to feel the world loosen around its edges, to sense that beneath the hard lines of form is a softness, a yielding, a field without rules. It is the space in dreams before the dream begins. It is the quiet before identity is chosen, and once known, it can never be unknown, because every shape, every thought, every god still echoes from that original, silent depth. Autochthony. Autochthony is the raw, ancient belief that a people are born not from other people, but from the land itself. The earth is not their home, it is their mother. Their blood is not descended from kings or migrants, but from soil, stone, and root. In this mythic worldview, identity is not something learned. It is something inherited from the ground beneath one's feet. To be autochthonous is to belong so deeply that exile is not just a change of place, it is a kind of death. For the Athenians, it was a sacred truth. They believed they sprang directly from the Attic earth, like wheat from the field, like trees from seed. No invasion, no migration, no foreign blood. Just pure, eternal presence, timeless and unmoved. This belief gave them more than pride. It gave them power. To be of the land meant the right to rule it, to defend it, to never leave it. It made the soil holy and every step a ritual of return. But autochthony is not just a tale of roots, it is a weight. It binds, it demands, it whispers, you are not free to drift, you belong. To leave is betrayal, to forget is treason. And yet, what happens when the land changes? When borders shift? When generations forget the old names for rivers and hills? The autochthonous soul begins to fracture. What once grounded now imprisons. Still, the myth persists. In moments of silence, barefoot on old ground, something stirs in the blood. Something older than memory. Something that says, you did not arrive here. You rose from here. Eudaimonism. Eudaimonism is not about happiness, not the kind sold in ads or chased in fleeting thrills. It is the ancient, soul-wrenching idea that the true purpose of life is flourishing, to become what one was meant to be in the deepest sense. The word itself holds a haunting beauty, eu meaning good, and daimon meaning spirit or inner guide. To live eudaimonically is to align with the voice inside that knows, that remembers, that won't let you settle for comfort when greatness is possible. The philosophers of old, Socrates, Aristotle, the Stoics, believed that every person carried within them a blueprint, a buried potential. But it would not come alive through pleasure, success, or praise. It would awaken only through a life of virtue. Not moral performance, but inner excellence. Character forged in fire. Wisdom earned through failure. Courage that does not tremble. Justice that costs. Eudaimonia is not a feeling. It is a state of being. It is when the soul begins to shine because it is no longer at war with itself. When action, thought, and purpose align like stars. The tragedy is how few reach it, because it requires a brutal honesty about what we are and what we are not. It asks for patience, sacrifice, effort with no applause. But those who walk this path glow with something different. A stillness, a strength, a quiet joy not dependent on fortune or fate. Because flourishing, in the ancient sense, means the self is no longer scattered. It has come home to itself, and the world feels more alive in its presence. Antilogos. Antilogos is the weapon of the sharpest minds, the art of contradiction, the act of opposing one argument with another of equal force. In the ancient world, especially among the sophists, it was not a flaw in logic. It was the arena of logic. Truth was not a single blade. It was two swords clashing in midair, each slicing through the certainty of the other. To master Antilogos, was to master the battlefield of reason, to stand in the storm of paradox and speak both sides with equal fire. But this was no game. Antilogos exposed something unsettling, that for every claim there is a counterclaim just as persuasive. That reason, for all its clarity, can be bent to serve both justice and injustice, light and shadow. The sophists were hated for this, for showing that law, ethics, even virtue could be argued backwards. That truth might not be absolute, but a performance. Yet in this danger was a deeper revelation. Antilogos revealed the instability beneath every conviction. It forced the listener to stop clinging to easy answers. It made thinking hurt. Socrates used it like a scalpel, cutting away the illusions people mistook for wisdom. To hear your beliefs spoken back to you, inverted and sharpened, is to see yourself from the outside, for the first time. And this is the terrifying power of Antilogos. It doesn't destroy truth. It stretches it until it screams. It shows that the boundary between sense and nonsense, between justice and deceit, is thinner than we dare admit, and always waiting to be crossed. Homoiomereis. Homoiomereis is the haunting idea that what is true of the whole is also true of every part, that each fragment contains the essence of the entire being. First spoken by the pre-Socratic philosopher Anaxagoras, it suggests a world where nothing is truly separate, where even the smallest piece carries the nature of the cosmos it came from. In a homoiomereis reality, a drop of blood contains blood, a sliver of bone contains bone, a flicker of soul contains soul. Division does not destroy identity, it repeats it. This vision dismantles the illusion of fragmentation. It whispers that everything is mirrored, reflected, echoed in everything else. The macrocosm sleeps inside the microcosm. The universe hides inside the cell. The divine sings through the dust. To hold a piece is, somehow, to hold the whole. It is not metaphor. It is structure. But there's a quiet terror in this too. If every part holds the whole, then there is no escape from anything. The sickness in one part infects the whole. The flaw in the smallest motion corrupts the entire system. Nothing can be isolated, blamed, or ignored. It is all one song, one voice, one breath fractured across endless mirrors. And yet, there's beauty in this endless repetition. In every child is the parent. In every tear is the ocean. In every wound is the entire wound of being. Homoiomereis is not just a theory of matter, it is a way of seeing, a truth that nothing is truly small, and no fragment is ever alone. Palingenesis. Palingenesis is the ancient promise that nothing is ever truly lost, that everything dies only to return again, reshaped, remembered, reborn. It is not reincarnation as comfort, but a far deeper current running beneath time itself, the belief that the cosmos repeats, that the soul circles back, that history is a spiral, winding through destruction into renewal. In Stoic thought, the universe burns in a great cosmic fire, only to rise again from its own ashes, identical in every detail. You have lived this life before. Every thought, every moment, every sorrow, you have wept it already, and you will again. But palingenesis is not just about eternity. It is about meaning. In a world of loss, in a life shattered by grief, it whispers that endings are not final. They are transitions. The soul may fall, but it remembers the way back. The city may crumble, but it waits in silence to rise. Even in personal despair, when identity itself collapses, palingenesis is the quiet force that rebuilds from within. The self you knew dies, and another emerges, wiser, quieter, forged by flame. There is pain in this return. Renewal does not come gently. It comes through ruin, through fire, through letting go of what once seemed permanent. Palingenesis does not preserve. It purifies. It does not soothe. It scorches. But when the smoke clears, Something ancient and unbreakable stands where you fell. Something that remembers every past life, every past wound, and still chooses to begin again. Not because it forgot, but because it finally understood. Synderesis. Synderesis is the flicker inside, the quiet, persistent voice that whispers what is right, even when everything else is screaming otherwise. Ancient philosophers and medieval theologians spoke of it not as a learned trait, but as something woven into the soul from birth. It is not a rulebook. It is not logic. It is not fear of consequence. Synderesis is the instinctive recoil from injustice, the unexplainable ache when witnessing cruelty, the invisible compass that keeps pointing north even when the world is upside down. It is what burns in a child who sees suffering and knows, without being told, that it is wrong. It is what shivers through the spine when a lie is told in the name of profit, or a kindness is ignored out of convenience. It is not loud, not theatrical. It doesn't shout. It knows. And when ignored, it doesn't punish. It grieves. Synderesis is not the same as conscience, which can be shaped, dulled, trained by culture, trauma, or repetition. Synderesis goes deeper. It is untouched. It is the ember buried beneath the ashes of fear, pride, ambition, and pain. Even in the darkest people, it flickers, faintly, waiting. It cannot be killed, but it can be buried so deeply that a person forgets it was ever there. Those who listen to it often pay a price. It does not offer comfort. It calls for sacrifice, honesty, courage. It leads away from what is easy and toward what is true. But for those who follow, there is a strange peace, not of safety, but of integrity. The soul begins to remember itself. Peras and Apeiron. Peras and Apeiron are the two primordial forces that tear and bind the universe. Peras is the limit, the boundary, the structure, the defined edge that gives shape to chaos. Apeiron is its haunting opposite, the boundless, the infinite, the formless well from which everything emerges and into which everything dissolves. In ancient Greek philosophy, especially among the Pythagoreans and later Plato, these two were not merely ideas. They were the secret tension behind existence itself. Everything that lives is a battle between Peras and Apeiron. Form trying to hold back the flood. Apeiron is the raw, infinite potential, dark, eternal, uncontrollable. It is night without end, space without edges, desire without name. It gives birth to everything, yet belongs to nothing. It is the womb of being and the mouth of oblivion. Peras steps in like a divine architect. It imposes order. It draws the line. It says, "This far, no further." It carves worlds from formlessness, numbers from noise, and bodies from breath. Together, they create the paradox of life, the need for structure inside an ocean of possibility. Every thought, every word, every heartbeat is Peras holding back the Apeiron. But no form lasts. Time breaks it. Entropy returns it. And the limitless waits, always waits, just beyond the edge. Peras gives clarity, meaning, identity, but only for a moment. Apeiron devours, but also renews. Creation, destruction, rebirth. They are not separate events, but a single trembling thread stretched between the limit and the limitless. And we, caught in between, are the line that flickers. Hapax Legomenon. Hapax Legomenon is a word that haunts the page, a term used only once in a given body of text, ancient or sacred, and never again. It is a whisper lost in the vastness of language, a solitary mark that appears, speaks, and then vanishes without repetition. In Greek, hapax means once, and legomenon means said. Together, they name the strangest kind of presence, something so singular that it defies full understanding, forever suspended in mystery. To encounter a hapax is to confront silence. Scholars wrestle with its meaning, unsure whether it's a forgotten metaphor, a scribal accident, or the key to a hidden truth. The Bible is full of them. So is Homer. So are the dead tongues of vanished civilizations. A word appears like a ghost in a sentence, and because there's no second appearance to compare, to contextualize, to decode, it lingers like an unsolved riddle. There's a strange beauty in this isolation. A Hapax Legomenon is like a flash of lightning in an ancient sky. Brilliant, momentary, unforgettable, but impossible to follow. It resists categorization. It cannot be domesticated by grammar or repetition. It stands alone, defiantly unique, reminding us that some meanings are never fully captured, only felt. For the philosopher and the mystic alike, the Hapax becomes more than a linguistic anomaly. It becomes a metaphor for human experience itself. A moment that happens once, a truth that appears but cannot be pinned down. It is the mark of something sacred, not because it's understood, but because it leaves us forever wondering what was truly said. Ataraxia. Ataraxia is not happiness. It is not joy. It is the deep, unshakable stillness that remains when nothing can disturb the soul. The ancient Greeks, especially the Epicureans and the skeptics, held ataraxia as the highest state a person could reach, not ecstasy, but equilibrium, not pleasure, but peace. It is the silence beneath thought, the quiet that survives every storm. To reach ataraxia is not to escape life, it is to remain untouched by its chaos. But this stillness is earned. It demands the severing of invisible chains. The opinions of others, the fear of death, the hunger for status. Ataraxia demands that all of them be let go. The world will pull and shout, seduce and terrify, but the one who seeks ataraxia does not react. They observe. They choose. They stay still. This is not coldness. It is clarity. It is refusing to be ruled by what cannot be controlled. The Epicureans reached it by seeking simple pleasures and avoiding pain. The skeptics reached it by suspending judgment, never claiming certainty, never needing to be right. In both paths, the result was the same: freedom. Not from life, but from its grip. Ataraxia is the moment when the noise fades and the self no longer jerks with every push. It is waking up one morning and realizing that the storm is still raging, but it's no longer inside you. And in that moment, even if just for a breath, the world loses its power, not because it changed, but because you did. Philotimia. Philotimia is the fire that drives a soul to rise, not for wealth, not for comfort, but for honor. In ancient Greece, it was more than ambition. It was the sacred hunger to live a life worthy of remembrance, to be seen not as rich or powerful, but as noble. The word itself means love of honor, but its meaning trembles with something deeper, something that touches pride, legacy, and the aching need to matter in the eyes of both gods and men. To possess philotimia was to live with an unbearable urgency. Every action, every word, every sacrifice was a chance to prove oneself. Not to boast, but to serve. Not to dominate, but to rise through excellence, through courage, through character. The warrior who died defending his city had philotimia. The statesman who put justice above gain had philotimia. The philosopher who chose truth over popularity bled it from every wound. But there is danger in this fire. Philotimia can become a double-edged sword. When twisted, it mutates into vanity, arrogance, obsession with status. A man can chase honor so blindly he forgets why he began the pursuit. He becomes a slave to the image of greatness, hollow inside, burning for applause rather than virtue. And yet, when held in balance, philotimia becomes something holy. It transforms mediocrity into meaning. It turns a fleeting life into a legacy carved in stone. In a world dulled by apathy and self-interest, philotimia still calls to the part of us that longs to rise, to serve, to leave behind something worthy of the name. Philopsychia. Philopsychia is the fierce, instinctive love of life, not in the abstract, not in poetry, but in the trembling, messy, brutal fact of being alive. It is the soul's refusal to give up, the primal fire that clings to breath even in despair. The ancients saw it not as a virtue or a vice, but as a force, raw and undeniable. To feel philopsychia is to feel the ache of survival, the magnetic pull toward continuation, even when logic says to let go. It awakens in the worst moments. When a soldier drags himself across a battlefield, not to win, but just to breathe. When a mother shields her child with her body without thinking. When the dying grip the edge of life with bloodied hands, whispering, "Not yet." Philopsychia lives there, in the marrow, in the gut, in the scream that says life matters, even when it hurts. But it is not mere instinct. It carries within it something sacred. The belief, often unconscious, that life holds meaning, even if we do not yet understand it. That one more sunrise, one more conversation, one more heartbeat might be enough to make sense of it all. It is what keeps the philosopher searching, the artist creating, the broken soul getting out of bed. Yet philopsychia is not without darkness. It can become clinging, desperation, fear of the unknown. It can bind us to suffering simply because we cannot imagine release. But at its core, it is a flame, not rational, not moral, but vital. The soul's wild declaration that being, even in pain, is better than not being at all. Autarkeia. Autarkeia is the quiet power of needing nothing. In a world built on craving, on endless reaching, on the desperate chase for more, autarkeia stands like a stone in the river, unmoved, whole, complete in itself. To the Stoics and Cynics, it was not just a virtue, it was freedom. The kind that cannot be bought, broken, or taken away. It is the inner fortress that no storm can shake, because it does not depend on the world to remain standing. Autarkeia means self-sufficiency, but not in the shallow sense of wealth or isolation. It is the fierce contentment of a soul that has made peace with itself. The man who has autarkeia walks through chaos without needing control. He loses status and feels no shame. He is overlooked and does not flinch. He drinks water from his hands and counts it enough, because nothing outside him defines his worth. This ideal was more than philosophy. It was defiance. Diogenes, sleeping in a barrel, had autarkeia. Epictetus, a slave who became a sage, had it carved into his spine. To possess it is to live without begging for approval, without selling pieces of yourself for comfort. It is the refusal to be owned, by desire, by fear, by anyone. But autarkeia is not cold. It is not a wall. It is warmth drawn from within, a life lit from the inside. It does not reject the world, but it no longer requires it. And in that stillness, in that unshakable core, a strange kind of joy appears, the joy of being enough. Thymos. Thymos is the fire in the chest, the ancient Greek's name for the spirited part of the soul that burns with pride, courage, honor, and rage. It is not reason. It is not appetite. It is the third force, pulsing between mind and desire, the source of our need to matter. Plato placed it between logos and epithymia, the guardian of the soul's dignity. Thymos does not calculate. It flares. When injustice strikes, when we are shamed, when we are seen or ignored, Thymos answers before the mind can speak. It is the feeling that surges when a soldier stands his ground, not for survival, but for something invisible, respect. It is the force that drives a child to scream, "That's not fair," before he even knows what fairness means. It's what fuels the hunger for recognition, for being valued, for defending one's name, one's tribe, one's truth. It can lift a person into nobility, or drag them into vengeance. Unchecked, Thymos becomes fury. It storms through battles, shatters alliances, builds empires on blood, but extinguished, it breeds apathy, souls that no longer rise when degraded, no longer care when silenced. Societies that lose thymos fall into decay. Souls that forget it fall into numbness. Yet when balanced with reason, thymos becomes the heartbeat of virtue. It does not beg for permission. It demands to be seen. And in its righteous form, it does not need to win. It only needs to stand. Thymos is the soul saying, I will not be nothing. I will not bow. I exist. Episteme. Episteme is not opinion. It is not belief. It is not the flickering guesswork that changes with the wind. Episteme is true, stable knowledge. Knowledge that is, no matter who speaks it, no matter when or where. To the ancient Greeks, especially Plato and Aristotle, episteme was the highest form of understanding, objective, eternal, untouched by emotion or bias. It is the kind of knowing that doesn't just describe reality, it reveals it. It cuts through illusion like sunlight breaking fog. To possess episteme is not to win arguments, it is to see. It is the philosopher emerging from the cave, eyes burning, not because he was told the truth, but because he stood in it. It is the mathematician grasping the eternal shape of a triangle, the physicist uncovering the law that governs falling bodies, the soul recognizing justice not as an opinion, but as something woven into the fabric of existence. But episteme does not come easily. It demands stripping away the noise of the senses, the seduction of appearances, the comfort of common sense. It is the long road of logic, of questioning, of silence. It is a discipline, a devotion, and most will never reach it, because it asks everything and offers no applause. Yet in a world drowning in half-truths, in shifting facts and curated realities, episteme remains the still point, the anchor, the one thing that does not move when everything else trembles. It does not scream. It does not sell. It simply waits for the one brave enough to see and silent enough to hear. Dianoia. Dianoia is the quiet machinery of the mind, the steady, deliberate process of reasoning, comparing, analyzing. It is not intuition. It is not divine vision. It is the middle path of thought, the space between ignorance and insight. In Plato's divided line, Dianoia sits beneath Noesis, pure understanding, but above mere opinion and illusion. It is the realm of mathematics, logic, and methodical thought. Where Noesis sees, Dianoia builds, brick by brick, premise by premise, slowly, carefully, patiently. It is the voice that asks, if this is true, then what follows? It maps, it models, it dissects. Dianoia doesn't leap, it climbs. Its strength is not speed, but structure. It gives the soul something to stand on, something stable in a world of shadows and noise. And yet, for all its precision, it knows its limits. Dianoia is humble. It does not claim to grasp the eternal. It prepares the ground. It clears the fog so vision might someday break through. But in a world addicted to speed, Dianoia is often dismissed. Too slow, too quiet, too unsure. And yet, without it, minds drift into chaos. Arguments collapse. Ideas rot. Dianoia is what turns flashes of thought into systems, what turns wonder into understanding. It is the scaffolding beneath insight, the silent labor that truth requires. It does not shine like genius. It does not roar like passion. But it holds the line. And in every moment of deep reflection, beneath the surface of clarity, Dianoia is there, working, turning, unfolding the soul into order. Noesis. Noesis is the moment the mind stops grasping and simply knows. It is not reasoning. It is not analysis. It is the pure, blinding clarity of insight that arrives all at once, like lightning in the dark. In Plato's world, Noesis was the highest form of knowledge, the soul's direct contact with truth itself. It bypasses the senses, the words, the doubts. It does not argue, it illuminates. To experience noesis is to stand at the edge of thought and fall inward. It's the sudden realization that something has always been true, and that it was never hidden, only unseen. It is not built piece by piece. It comes whole, complete, untouchable. It is how the philosopher glimpses the realm of forms. It is how the mystic feels the presence of the divine. It is the silent explosion when the inner world aligns with the eternal. This knowledge doesn't unfold like a lecture. It descends like a gift. And yet, it is the most real thing one can know. Compared to noesis, all other knowing feels like guessing in the dark. It is what happens when the soul remembers itself. When the mind, for a moment, is free of noise, free of fear, free of the need to think, because it finally sees. Noesis cannot be taught. It cannot be explained. It can only be pointed to, like a window facing the sun. Those who have tasted it often return changed, quieter, more certain, as if they've seen something too sacred to fully speak, because they have. Agoge. Agoge is not schooling. It is the forging of a soul through hardship, obedience, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Born in Sparta, but echoing across all ancient thought on virtue, agoge was a system of education designed not to inform, but to transform. It stripped boys of comfort, privilege, and even family, replacing them with discipline, austerity, and a brutal kind of brotherhood. But deeper than its militaristic exterior, agoge was about forming a human being who embodied a rite, excellence in its rawest form. The child was not taught what to think. He was taught how to endure, how to stand alone, how to serve something larger than himself. Pain was not punishment. It was preparation. Silence was not absence. It was strength. The agoge taught that the body must be hardened, but the soul even more so. Pride had no place, nor did softness, excuses, or self-pity. A Spartan boy who cried for comfort was not corrected. He was forgotten. Yet the cruelty of agoge held a paradox. In stripping a person down, it revealed what could not be broken. Courage, loyalty, restraint, resilience, all were forged in fire, not words. The agoge believed that virtue is not natural. It must be trained, tested, beaten into shape, and only those who passed through its fire were worthy of freedom, leadership, or remembrance. In today's world, agoge feels alien, almost inhuman. But beneath the harshness lies a question that still stings. Who are you when comfort is gone? What remains when nothing is given? Agoge's answer was simple: discipline or dust. Aletheia. Aletheia is not truth as correctness. It is not a checklist of facts or a logical conclusion. Aletheia is truth as unveiling, the slow and terrifying pulling back of the curtain to reveal what has always been there, hidden in plain sight. In ancient Greek thought, especially in the pre-Socratic and later Heideggerian traditions, aletheia meant more than accuracy. It meant disclosure. It meant awakening. It meant that truth is not something we invent, but something that reveals itself when illusion finally falls away. To live in aletheia is to live in confrontation. It is to feel the weight of things that once felt light. It is the moment you stop telling the story you wanted to believe and face the story that was always real. Aletheia is the shattering silence after denial, the rawness beneath the mask, the flash of recognition that makes you want to look away, but can't. And yet, it is sacred. Because aletheia is not cruel. It is clean. It is what the soul truly craves, even when it burns. It is the lover who cannot lie, the mirror that does not flatter, the voice that does not soften the blow. It does not bend to opinion. It does not care for comfort. It simply waits, for the moment we are brave enough to see. And once seen, Aletheia cannot be unseen. It changes how we walk, how we speak, how we live. Because when the veil drops, and truth finally stands naked before us, the world no longer feels like fiction. It feels like something we must now answer to. Eikasia. Eikasia is the shadow of a shadow, the lowest rung of knowledge in Plato's hierarchy of understanding. It is not ignorance, but something more haunting, the illusion of knowing, based on reflections of reflections. Eikasia is when the mind mistakes images for reality, appearances for truth, and symbols for substance. It is the realm of blind assumption, of passive acceptance, of those who live among flickers on the cave wall and think the flickers are all there is. Plato placed Eikasia beneath belief, beneath reason, beneath true understanding. It is the mind's most vulnerable state, dull, unawakened, intoxicated by surfaces. To live in Eikasia is to consume narratives without questioning, to trust faces without knowing souls, to chase images without realizing they are hollow. It is seeing a statue and thinking you understand the god. It is watching shadows and thinking you've seen the source. But Eikasia is not just a philosophical warning. It is a mirror of modern life. It is the curated screen, the filtered smile, the algorithm whispering what to want. It is illusion so deep it feels natural, safe, real. And yet, something in the soul knows it's asleep. Something aches. Something flickers beneath the flickers. Plato believed liberation begins by escaping Eikasia, not by climbing instantly to truth, but by turning, slowly, painfully, toward the light. But that turning hurts. The shadows resist, and most never leave. Because Eikasia is comfortable. It flatters, it protects, but it also imprisons. And those who remain inside its glow may never realize they're not seeing reality. They're seeing its faintest echo. Kalon. Kalon is beauty that transcends appearance. It is not charm, not seduction, not surface. It is the radiance of moral nobility shining through action, speech, and presence. To the ancient Greeks, especially in the minds of Socrates and Plato, Kalon was the union of the beautiful and the good. To Kalon kagathon. It is when the soul aligns so purely with virtue that even the body seems to glow. It is why the Spartans believed a noble death in battle was beautiful. Why a kind act, done in silence, can stop a room. Why truth, even when painful, moves the heart. Kalon cannot be bought or copied. It is not decoration. It is essence. It is the way someone stands in the face of injustice, the restraint behind a powerful hand, the quiet strength of someone who will not lie, even when no one is watching. Kalon is beauty that demands nothing, yet elevates everything it touches. It is not loud. It does not beg for praise. But those who witness it never forget. To live with Kalon is to carry grace in hardship. To speak with dignity when surrounded by insult. It is the kind of beauty that ages well, deepens with time, and leaves something holy in its wake. And in a world obsessed with surfaces, Kalon whispers of something lost, something ancient, something that reminds us that true beauty has weight, that it is earned, and that nothing stirs the soul more than seeing virtue made visible, shining through flesh like light through thin silk. Ergon is the soul's assignment, the intrinsic function, the essential work, the purpose a thing was born to fulfill. In ancient Greek philosophy, especially in Aristotle's thought, ergon is not a job or a task. It is identity expressed through action. A knife's ergon is to cut. A heart's is to beat. And a human's? That is the question that splits a life in two. To discover one's ergon is to discover what it means to be. Ergon is not about desire. It's not what someone wants to do. It's what they are meant to do. What they are built for. And when there is a fracture between being and doing, the soul begins to wither. The bird that cannot fly, the thinker who cannot speak, the artist who buries their hands. This is not failure of talent, but betrayal of nature. The deepest suffering is not pain. It is disconnection from one's ergon. Aristotle believed that eudaimonia, true human flourishing, comes only when a person lives in alignment with their ergon. Not just occasionally, but constantly. It is the rhythm of virtue in motion. Rationality sharpened through action. Excellence made visible through purpose. But finding ergon is no gentle revelation. It requires stripping away imitation, silence, distraction. It requires standing in the fire of self-honesty and asking, "What am I for?" The world will offer 1,000 answers, titles, roles, praise, but only one will resonate like bone, recognizing bone. Ergon is not what makes life easier. It's what makes it real. It is the doing that completes the being. Phronesis. Phronesis is the wisdom of the real world, the sharp, grounded intelligence that knows when to speak and when to stay silent, when to act and when to wait. It is not theory. It is not brilliance. It is judgment, earned through experience and burn scars. Aristotle called it practical wisdom, but that word feels too soft. Phronesis is the soul's compass in a world without maps. It sees the unseen currents of human behavior, weighs values without flinching, and knows that right and wrong are rarely painted in black and white. Where logic hesitates and emotion distorts, phronesis moves. It understands that life is full of contradiction, that virtue is not a formula, but a dance. The phronimos, the person who possesses phronesis, is not perfect, but they are clear. They read situations like poetry. They sense motive beneath politeness. They know when mercy becomes weakness and when justice becomes cruelty. And more than anything, they know that timing is everything. Phronesis is rare because it cannot be taught. It must be lived. It grows in silence, in failure, in nights spent questioning everything. It is what remains when ideals collapse and you must choose the best path through broken ground. The soldier who avoids unnecessary bloodshed, the judge who listens before sentencing, the leader who resists the roar of the mob. These are not guided by rules. They are guided by phronesis. It does not seek glory. It seeks what is fitting. And in a world addicted to extremes, phronesis is the lost art of balance, the ancient voice that whispers, "Do what is wise, not what is loud." Sophrosyne. Sophrosyne is the ancient force that holds a soul together, not through power, but through balance. It is temperance, yes, but not in the weak sense of mere moderation. Sophrosyne is the quiet, unshakable strength of self-restraint, the harmony between desire and reason, the inner poise that makes chaos kneel. To the Greeks, it was one of the highest virtues, not because it glittered, but because it endured. A person with sophrosyne does not crave applause. They do not flinch at insult. They walk through temptation, not untouched, but unmoved. Their pleasures are chosen, not chased. Their anger burns clean, but never uncontrolled. They are not ice, but they are fire held in form. Socrates praised sophrosyne not as passivity, but as mastery, the soul governing itself, not through denial, but through deep alignment. This virtue was not born in comfort. It was forged in tension, in the war between impulse and intention. Sophrosyne does not mean the absence of hunger. It means knowing how to feed it without being devoured. It is the drinker who stops before drunkenness, the warrior who knows when not to strike, the lover who does not lose themselves in love. In a world that worships indulgence and calls it freedom, sophrosyne feels like resistance. But it is the opposite. It is the truest form of sovereignty, the ability to say yes and no from within, not because of fear or guilt or image, but because the soul knows its own weight and refuses to tip. Acratic. Acratic is the tragedy of knowing what is right and doing the opposite anyway. It is the ancient Greek word for the moment the soul fractures, when reason stands helpless while impulse takes control. The Encratic person is not ignorant. They see the truth clearly. They understand the consequences. They want to choose wisely, and yet they don't. They reach for what they swore they wouldn't. They speak the words they promised to hold back. They become strangers to their own intention. To be Encratic is to live with the ache of inner conflict. It is to stand in front of temptation and whisper no, only to watch the hand move forward anyway. Aristotle saw Enkrateia as weakness of will, when desire overpowers deliberation. But it's more than weakness. It's betrayal from within, a quiet self-sabotage, a war between the head and the heart, with the body caught in the middle. It happens in small moments, staying silent when justice demands a voice, choosing comfort over growth, chasing fleeting pleasure while long-term peace slips away. And after, the guilt is sharp. Not because of what was done, but because it could have been avoided. The Encratic soul remembers its strength too late. Yet within Enkrateia lies the human condition exposed. We are not robots of reason. We are creatures torn by competing voices, one pulling toward what is noble, the other toward what is near. And in that pull, something raw is revealed. Wisdom is not enough. Knowing is not doing. And the hardest battles are always the ones we fight against ourselves. Catharsis. Catharsis is the soul's violent cleansing, the sacred purge of emotion through experience so raw, so piercing, it leaves the self reborn. In ancient tragedy, it was not the plot that mattered, but the purging it provoked. The audience wept not out of weakness, but because something hidden in them was finally touched, shaken loose, and released. Catharsis is not healing through comfort. It is healing through confrontation. Aristotle saw it in the power of drama, pity and fear, unleashed through art, flushing out the excesses that build inside us. But catharsis is not confined to the theater. It lives in every breakdown, every scream, every moment when the wall between control and collapse finally gives way. It is the tremble after rage, the sob after silence, the stillness after surviving what you thought would break you. It does not ask for permission. It arrives like a storm. And when it passes, the world feels different. But catharsis is not just release. It is recognition. To feel deeply, to suffer through a story, even if it is not your own, is to remember that you are human. That you too can bleed, can tremble, can endure. In a world that numbs, edits, polishes every edge, catharsis is sacred violence. It returns feeling to the numb, voice to the voiceless, weight to the hollow. And though it may leave you undone, that unraveling is not the end. It is the clearing, the sacred space where the soul, emptied of its rot, begins again, lighter, truer, and somehow whole. Hedon. Hedon is the shimmering, intoxicating force of pleasure, the immediate sweetness of sensation, the delight that floods the senses and silences the mind. To the ancient Greeks, it was both gift and danger. Hedon is the warm bath, the perfect touch, the laughter that erupts unplanned. It is the body's way of saying yes. And for Epicurus, it was sacred, not to be chased blindly, but chosen wisely. Not every pleasure leads to peace. Some are traps dressed in sweetness. But true hedon, pleasure aligned with nature, was a compass to the good life. Yet hedon is not subtle. It pulls. It tempts. It whispers that now is all that matters. It's the lover's skin, the taste of wine, the applause that tingles down the spine. In moments of pain, it becomes a god. In moments of clarity, it becomes a test. Because too much hedon leads to ruin, and too little leads to despair. The challenge is not to reject it, but to rule it. To know when to drink deeply and when to stop. When to indulge and when to endure. The paradox is that hedon, in its purest form, does not demand. It invites. It blooms in simplicity. A meal shared. A sunrise watched. A body held without shame. And in those moments, when the soul feels joy without guilt, when pleasure sings without possession, that is not sin. That is harmony. Hedon, in balance, is not indulgence. It is grace. Arete is not talent. It is not skill. It is the ancient call to become everything the soul was born to be, fully, fiercely, without excuse. In Greek thought, arete meant excellence, but not as the world defines it. It was not about winning or outperforming others. It was about fulfilling one's deepest nature. A knife has a rate when it cuts clean, a horse when it runs strong, a human when they live in alignment with their highest potential, ethically, mentally, physically, spiritually. Arete is not loud. It is not showy. It is silent discipline, quiet integrity. The invisible fire that pushes a person to grow, not because someone is watching, but because the soul demands it. The athlete who trains in the dark, the philosopher who wrestles with truth alone, the mother who chooses patience again and again. These are the moments where arete lives. But it is not easy. Arete is ruthless. It exposes laziness, excuses, self-pity. It whispers, "This is not your best," and demands more. It is not perfectionism. It is devotion. It asks, "What were you made for? And are you becoming it?" In a world chasing comfort and shortcuts, arete is rebellion. It is saying no to mediocrity, even when no one would blame you for settling. And yet, arete is not about glory. It is about harmony, when action and essence align. When you are no longer performing goodness, but are good, not because of reward, but because anything less would dishonor what you truly are. Moira. Moira is the ancient, invisible hand that carves a path before a soul is even born. It is fate, not as punishment, but as allotment. A portion. A thread spun at the beginning, measured without mercy, and cut without hesitation. To the Greeks, Moira was not a metaphor. It was a force. A trio of goddesses, the Moirai, spinning, measuring, and severing the thread of each life with quiet precision. Even the gods bowed to them. Even Zeus could not command them. Moira ruled all. It is not about destiny as glory. It is not the heroic path you dream of. Moira does not care if the road is noble or tragic. It only cares that it is yours. Your breath, your body, your sorrows, your name. What has been given to you will not be taken from another. It is not for envy. It is not for complaint. The ancients feared Moira, but they also trusted her, because what is given is what must be lived. And yet, there is a strange freedom within her grasp, because once you accept your Moira, your portion, you stop reaching for what is not yours. You stop comparing your story to another's. You begin to carry your weight with dignity, knowing it was meant for you. Not to punish, but to shape, to burn away the excess, to carve the soul into what it was always meant to become. Moira is not the chain, she is the map. And though the road may be cruel, it is also sacred, because it is yours, and no one else's. Eris. Eris is not just the goddess of strife. She is the pulse behind every transformation that begins in chaos. To the ancient Greeks, Eris was more than discord. She was the split in the road, the fracture in the mirror, the sharp breath before revolution. There are two Erises, Hesiod said. One brings senseless war and ruin. The other stirs the soul to rise, to compete, to exceed its limits. Both wear the same face. Eris enters quietly. A rivalry. A wound. A whisper of injustice. And suddenly, what was still begins to tremble. She is the force that tears friendships, topples kings, fractures illusions. But she is also the pressure that births genius, the hunger that drives invention, the friction that makes greatness possible. Without Eris, there is no motion, only comfort. No challenge, only stagnation. In every conflict lies a question: will this break me or build me? Eris does not care which. She offers the fire. The choice is yours. She teaches that growth is not gentle, that becoming more often begins with a fall. Her presence is painful, disorienting, but honest. She does not lie like peace does. She rips the veil, shows the cracks, and dares the soul to rise or be destroyed. Most fear her. Some worship her. The wise learn to listen, because in the storm of Eris, the old self is always at risk, and something greater, more powerful, more true, waits behind the rubble, asking, "Can you rise from this? Or will this be the end of you?" Telos. Telos is the hidden pull behind everything that moves, the ultimate purpose, the final cause, the reason why a thing is. In Aristotle's world, nothing exists without a telos. The seed aches to become a tree. The eye longs to see. The human soul stretches toward fulfillment, not by accident, but by design. Telos is not a goal you choose. It is the destination woven into your being before you took your first breath. It is not ambition. It is becoming. To ignore your telos is to live in fragments, to chase what others value, to build a life that looks whole but feels hollow. But when you begin to align with it, when every action moves you closer to what you are meant to be, the soul stirs. You feel it in silence, in work that doesn't drain, in moments when time disappears and you are not performing. You are embodying. But telos is demanding. It is not comfort, not pleasure, not success as the world defines it. Sometimes it leads through pain, through loss, through stripping away everything false. Because telos does not care who you pretend to be. It pulls toward who you truly are. And if ignored too long, it rots the soul from the inside. Restlessness, emptiness, that quiet dread that whispers, "This isn't it." Telos is not a finish line. It is a compass. It is the quiet direction etched into your bones. You can deny it, delay it, distract yourself, but you cannot escape it, because telos waits. Not outside of you, but within, unchanging, undeniable, unforgotten. Panta Rei. Panta Rei means everything flows, and in those two words, Heraclitus shattered the illusion of permanence. Nothing stays, nothing holds, nothing waits. The river you step into is never the same river twice, and neither are you. This was not metaphor. It was the raw, burning truth of existence. Everything is in motion. The world is fire, not stone, and every attempt to fix it in place, through memory, tradition, identity, is already dying the moment it begins. Heraclitus saw that change is not a part of life. It is life. To resist it is to suffer. To cling to what was, to mourn what cannot return, is to swim against a current that never stops moving. He didn't weep over this truth. He revered it. Because in constant change, there is freedom. In the collapse of certainty, there is awakening. When everything flows, every moment becomes sacred, unrepeatable, ungraspable, alive. But it's terrifying. The self you knew yesterday is already dissolving. The love, the grief, the anger, they are water in your hands. Panta Rei demands surrender. It dares you to dance with impermanence, to stop trying to make life hold still, and instead meet it in motion, fluid, fierce, burning with time. And yet, in that flow, a deeper order breathes. Logos moves through the chaos. The fire never dies. It transforms. You lose yourself, only to find something truer on the other side. Something not fixed, but free. And the river, always the river, keeps carrying everything home. Anax. Anax is not merely a king. It is the ancient breath of sovereignty, before thrones were carved and crowns were forged. To be called anax in early Greek thought was not just to rule men, but to stand as a sacred bridge between the mortal and the divine. It is a word that echoes from the age before democracy, before politics, before power was diluted into systems. Anax was presence, weight, command that needed no explanation. In Homeric epics, anax was reserved for those who ruled not by law, but by aura. Agamemnon was anax andron, lord of men. Zeus was anax theon, king of gods. But it wasn't the title that mattered. It was what the title revealed, an alignment with something higher. Anax meant the chosen, the one who carried fate in his voice, the one whose fall would shake nations. But there is a loneliness in being anax. He is exalted, but isolated, feared, more than loved. He is the first to lead and the first to bleed. If he falters, the realm fractures. If he doubts, the gods grow silent. The people may chant his name, but they do not know his burden. Anax is not a man who seeks power. He is one who cannot escape it. His life is no longer his own. He is not crowned, he is claimed. And beneath the robes, beneath the title, lives the tension, the divine weight of command, and the crushing knowledge that even kings are mortal. Even anax must kneel to time. Apeiron. Apeiron is the terrifying womb of existence, the boundless, the infinite, the formless void from which all things arise and into which all things return. First named by Anaximander, it is not chaos in the modern sense, but something far more ancient and ungraspable. Apeiron is without limit, without edge, without shape. It is not darkness. It is the absence of even light to define it. It is not nothing, but a kind of raw potential so absolute it defies the very categories of being. Before form, before time, before gods, there was Apeiron. It was not created. It was never born. It simply is, and always has been. The cosmos, according to Anaximander, emerges from Apeiron not as an act of will, but as a necessity, like breath forced into lungs, like fire sparking from friction. The world divides from it, struggles to define itself against it, and eventually dissolves back into its depth. Everything known is just a ripple on its surface. To contemplate Apeiron is to feel small, not in the face of a deity, but in the face of pure being without shape. It is infinity stripped of comfort, boundlessness without direction, and yet it holds within it the secret of all becoming. Every star, every law, every fleeting thought came from that nameless source. Apeiron is the origin that never speaks, the mother that never appears, the silence beneath the universe's roar. To stand before it, even in thought, is to lose the self, to feel the edges blur, to realize that form is temporary, but the formless is eternal, and it is watching, quiet, patient, boundless. Noûs Poietikos. Noûs Poietikos is the divine fire within the mind, the active intellect, the mysterious force that does not just think, but creates thought itself. For Aristotle, it was not part of the body, not bound to time or decay. It was eternal, immaterial, untouched by sensation. While the passive intellect receives impressions like wax receiving a seal, the Noûs Poietikos is the flame that carves meaning into the wax. It is the sculptor, not the marble, the light, not the eye. This was no ordinary faculty. Noûs Poietikos was the part of the soul that touches the eternal. It transforms potential into actuality. It doesn't merely process information. It activates understanding, ignites form from formlessness. Some saw it as a divine gift. Others whispered it was not human at all, but something within us that doesn't belong to us. A visitor, a spark of the divine mind. And if that is true, then something in you is not dying. Something in you cannot rot, cannot forget, cannot be erased. It is the still point behind your thoughts, the silent clarity you glimpse in moments of deep reflection, when everything unnecessary falls away. Most live without ever touching it. Their intellects remain passive, stuffed with impressions, opinions, borrowed truths. But the one who awakens the active intellect becomes more than human. Because Noûs Poietikos does not just understand the world, it becomes it. It sees the eternal in the changing, the unshakable in the flood. It does not guess. It knows. And in that knowing, it does not echo truth. It is truth. Dyad. Dyad is the ancient principle of two, not just a number, but the first wound in the unity of the cosmos. If the monad is the one, pure, whole, indivisible, then the dyad is its mirror and rupture, the birth of contrast, tension, difference. In Pythagorean and Platonic thought, the dyad is where multiplicity begins, where the cosmos fractures into opposites, light and dark, self and other, male and female, being and becoming. It is not evil. It is not good. It is the condition of existence, because to exist at all is to be something against something else. The dyad is the breath between opposites. It gives rise to motion, to comparison, to conflict and beauty. It creates rhythm, life and death, inhale and exhale, presence and absence. Without it, there is no relationship, no perception, no becoming. But it is also the root of suffering. Because the moment two exists, longing is born. Division, struggle. The self becomes aware of its lack, its other, its missing half. Philosophically, the dyad was feared and revered. It broke the stillness of the one. It opened the door to complexity, but also to illusion. For with two comes choice, contradiction, uncertainty. And yet, without the dyad, there would be no world, only silence. In every heart is the dyad at war, reason and desire, fear and courage, truth and deception. And in that war, life moves. The sages sought to transcend it, not by destroying duality, but by seeing through it. Because the dyad is not the enemy, it is the veil, and behind it, the one still waits. Epoche. Epoche is the razor's edge between thought and silence, the radical act of suspending judgment in a world addicted to certainty. Born from ancient skepticism and later refined by phenomenology, epoche means refusing to say this is true or this is false. It is not ignorance. It is restraint, the deliberate choice to withhold conclusions, to let things be without forcing them into categories. To the Stoics and skeptics alike, epoche was not weakness. It was the deepest form of intellectual courage. The mind craves closure. It wants to label, to finalize, to say, this is how the world is. But epoche interrupts that reflex. It is the silence after the question, the breath before belief. When we practice epoche, we stop chasing the comfort of answers. We step back from the noise of dogma, opinion, impulse. We dwell in the tension of not knowing, and in doing so, we begin to see. It is in this suspension that illusion loses power. Appearances stop deceiving. Biases float to the surface. Assumptions unravel. And suddenly, what we thought was obvious becomes strange, radiant, alive. Epoche does not give answers. It clears the ground so truth can emerge. Not forced, not demanded, but revealed. Few can stay there. The mind rebels. Silence stretches too long. But in those rare moments when epoche is held, pure, open, ungrasping, a kind of sacred vision is possible. Not belief, not disbelief, just clarity untouched by certainty. The world, unfiltered, reality, without opinion, and the self, no longer clutching, simply watching. Prolepsis. Prolepsis is the soul's silent inheritance, The ancient idea that within each person lies a seed of knowledge, planted before experience, before learning, before language. To the Epicureans, prolepsis was the mind's natural anticipation of truth, a built-in intuition that allows us to recognize justice, God, or self, not because we were taught, but because we already knew. It is the first spark of understanding that flickers before thought. A whisper in the mind that says, "This is right," before reason catches up. It is how a child, without ever reading a law, feels wrongness in cruelty. How a stranger's suffering stirs recognition. How the soul leans toward beauty, not by instruction, but by memory. Prolepsis is not deduction, it is return. The return to what the soul carried into this world before it was shaped by it. This idea is dangerous. It suggests that truth is not outside us, but within, and always has been. That teachers don't implant wisdom, but awaken it. That philosophy is not construction, it is excavation. But the tragedy of prolepsis is forgetting. The world piles noise on top of intuition. Culture buries clarity. We learn to doubt what we already know. And yet, in moments of silence, in dreams, in sudden certainty, we remember. Not with words, but with a feeling too deep to explain. Prolepsis is the soul recognizing itself in the mirror of the world. Not because the mirror teaches, but because it reflects what was always there, waiting to be seen again. Kleos. Kleos is the thunder that echoes after death, the immortal sound of a name carried through time by heroic deeds. To the ancient Greeks, Kleos was not fame. It was not ego. It was the only form of eternity a mortal could touch. Gods had immortality by nature. Men earned it through action, through courage, through sacrifice, through standing in the fire when others ran. Kleos was the only shield against oblivion. In the world of Homer, to die without Kleos was to vanish. To live without striving for it was worse. To waste the chance the gods had given you to matter. Achilles knew his choice. A long, quiet life, or a short, blazing one that would never be forgotten. He chose fire, and in doing so, chose Kleos. Not because he hated life, but because he loved meaning more. But Kleos is not given. It is claimed, and only in the harshest conditions. On the battlefield, in the courtroom, at sea, wherever risk and fate collide. Kleos is carved from struggle. It cannot be bought, faked, or inherited. It must be earned, in full view of gods and men. Yet Kleos is not gentle. It demands everything. It whispers that death is not the enemy, obscurity is. It asks, will you leave behind a name or a silence? And it offers no guarantees. Only this: if you rise, if you act, if you dare, then long after your body falls, your name may still rise like smoke into the sky, remembered not because you lived, but because you mattered. Eidos. Eidos is the sacred sting that stops a hand, lowers a voice, softens a gaze. It is the ancient Greek sense of shame, but not the kind born from humiliation or guilt. Eidos is deeper. It is reverence in the face of greatness, restraint in the presence of vulnerability, humility before the divine order of things. It is the invisible force that keeps the soul from overreaching, from dishonoring others, from forgetting its place in a cosmos that watches. It rises when the eyes of the community are upon us, but more powerfully when no one is watching at all. Eidos whispers, you know better. It burns not to punish, but to protect, to preserve dignity, both one's own and that of others. In Homeric times, warriors felt eidos not when they feared defeat, but when they feared shame. Not for losing, but for failing to be worthy. It was the blush before disgrace, the tremble before an unspoken law. But eidos is not weakness. It takes strength to bow the head, to remain silent when pride wants to shout, to walk away when vengeance calls. It is the guardian of harmony in both self and society. When eidos dies, shamelessness breeds arrogance, cruelty, corruption. A society without eidos becomes a spectacle. A soul without it becomes a storm. Eidos is the soul's pause before the fall, the internal veil that keeps us human. And though it cannot be taught, when awakened, it can shape a life with more power than law. Because some truths don't shout, they shame. And in that shame, something sacred begins to stir. Kairos. Kairos is not time as a clock measures it. It is not the steady ticking of seconds, not the endless march of Chronos. Kairos is the divine crack in time, the rare electric moment when everything aligns, when action, intention, and destiny collide. It is the moment the arrow must be released, the word must be spoken, the leap must be taken. Wait too long, and the window closes. Move too soon, and it passes unfulfilled. Kairos demands more than action. It demands knowing when. To the ancient Greeks, Kairos was not measured. It was sensed, felt, a sacred intuition. It arrives without warning, but always leaves a mark. The general sees it on the battlefield. The lover feels it in a single glance. The artist captures it in a breathless stroke. Kairos is the moment the ordinary becomes irreversible, the tipping point, the threshold. It is not polite, it does not repeat, and it does not beg. Kairos is fierce, unforgiving, but it is also grace. It is the universe whispering now and handing you the blade, the pen, the door. Miss it, and life resumes its rhythm. Catch it, and nothing remains the same. What makes Kairos so haunting is its silence. It does not announce itself. It hides inside chaos, chance, even tragedy. Only the attentive can see it. Only the brave can seize it. And those who do carry with them the weight and wonder of that moment forever, not because it was long, but because it was right. Time paused. The soul moved, and the world opened. Chronos. Chronos is the ticking of the eternal clock, the relentless, measured, linear unfolding of time that carries all things toward their end. To the ancient Greeks, Chronos was not a god of chaos or mystery, but of order and inevitability. He is the grind, the countdown, the forward march of seconds, seasons, centuries. Chronos devours everything. Every birth, every empire, every breath is marked by his rhythm. He does not rage. He does not pity. He simply moves. This is not the sacred time of revelation or eternity. This is time that can be measured, scheduled, controlled. It is the time of calendars, deadlines, aging skin, rusting steel. It is the time that haunts ambition. Too much for the lazy, never enough for the driven. In the world of Chronos, all things decay. Nothing stands still. Memory fades, beauty withers, and even gods grow silent. And yet, Chronos is not the enemy. He is the condition of change, of growth, of story. Without him, nothing could begin or end. Without him, love could never be tested, grief could never be healed, and meaning could never emerge from struggle. Chronos gives weight to every choice, pressure to every moment, mortality to every kiss. But his presence is heavy. He waits at every finish line, in every mirror, in every clock that ticks a little too loud when the room falls silent. And though we run from him, fear him, curse him, we also owe him everything. For without Chronos, there would be no journey, only stillness, only silence, only the unbearable eternity of never changing at all. Aion. Aion is not the time that passes, it is the time that is. Eternal, boundless, unbroken. Where Chronos slices time into moments, Aion swallows them whole. It is the vast, circular rhythm behind the ticking of clocks, the silent backdrop against which all change unfolds. To the ancients, Aion was not just an idea, it was a force, a living, breathing presence. Not time as a line, but time as a circle, not a sequence, but a cycle. Aeon is the endless return, the sun rising not for the first time, but for the 1000th. The soul returning not as it was, but as it must be. It is time seen from the God's perspective, unchanging, infinite, divine. Empires rise and fall inside it. Lives burn fast and vanish. But Ion watches, unmoved. What you call history, Ion calls repetition. What you call fate, it calls memory. To live within Ion is to feel the weight of time, not as pressure, but as presence. It's the sense that nothing is new, and yet everything matters. That death is not an end, but a turning. That what has been will be again. Different, but the same. The ancients felt Ion in rituals, in seasons, in myths told again and again as if for the first time. And within it, the human soul floats, trapped in the illusion of urgency, yet aching to remember the eternity it came from. Ion is not what moves. It is what holds. The great stillness that makes all motion possible. The time beneath all time. Ananke. Ananke is the chain wrapped around the throat of the cosmos. The ancient Greek force of necessity, compulsion, inevitability. Older than the gods, untouched by prayer. Ananke is not fate as a personal destiny, but fate as law. Cold, impersonal, unbreakable. She does not whisper. She does not tempt. She commands. And even Zeus, king of Olympus, was said to bow before her. Where Kronos marches time forward, Ananke binds its direction. She is the iron spine beneath every cause and consequence, every reaction, every unchosen burden. When tragedy strikes and no answer satisfies, Ananke is the silence behind it. When a choice must be made, but all paths lead to pain, Ananke is the shadow narrowing the options. She is not malice. She is not mercy. She simply is. The logic of existence, unfeeling and firm. The Greeks did not beg Ananke for favors. They endured her. Because to live under her rule is to accept that there are forces no will can bend. That some things, death, limitation, loss, arrive not because we deserve them, but because they are required. And yet, within that weight is something paradoxically liberating. When the soul stops fighting the inevitable, it finds clarity, strength, stillness, the freedom that only comes from recognizing what cannot be changed. Ananke is the edge of human power, the line we cannot cross. But she is also the mirror. For in her grip, we learn what we truly control, not the world, but how we meet it. Not the outcome, but the integrity of our step. And in that, there is something almost divine. Stasis. Stasis is not peace. It is the silence before collapse, the stillness that suffocates, the hidden rot inside what appears stable. To the ancient Greeks, stasis meant more than immobility. It meant internal fracture. Civil strife. Brother against brother. City against itself. It was the most feared condition in a polis, not because it was loud, but because it was inevitable when justice was ignored and imbalance left to fester. Stasis doesn't announce itself. It builds, quietly, slowly, until the moment when everything that seemed united suddenly tears. In the body politic, stasis begins as resentment, private grumblings, unspoken rage, invisible inequality. And then it spreads, infecting speech, institutions, identity. One faction demands change. Another clings to tradition. Leaders rise who speak in absolutes. Dialogue dies. Trust decays. And then comes rupture, not from outside, but from within. Stasis is the enemy born inside the house. But stasis is not always loud. It also appears as stagnation. A soul stuck in place. A nation unable to grow. A person who has stopped becoming. No movement, no vision, just the slow death of motionless existence. And in that stillness, something darker breeds. apathy, cynicism, decay, dressed as order. The Greeks knew that avoiding stasis required more than laws. It required balance, justice, dialogue, virtue. Without those, the illusion of peace would shatter into faction and fire. Because stasis doesn't need an invader to destroy. It only needs silence and time. And when it comes, it doesn't ask who is right. It only burns. Ironia. Ironia is the sharpest weapon hidden in silence, the ancient art of saying less than you know, of pretending ignorance to expose the ignorance of others. It is not sarcasm. It is not passive deflection. Ironia is strategic understatement, the quiet performance of humility that turns arrogance inside out. Socrates wielded it like a blade. He asked questions not because he didn't know, but because he did. And in watching others reveal themselves, stumble, contradict, unravel, he taught without preaching, conquered without force. To the Greeks, ironia was dangerous because it blurred power. The one who plays dumb often holds the highest intelligence. The one who listens the longest often sees the deepest. It flips the social order, making the confident seem foolish, the loud seem lost. Ironia allows truth to surface on its own, without the brute force of argument. It disarms. It disorients. It deceives to reveal. But it is not cruelty. At its highest form, ironia is mercy. It gives the other person a chance to arrive at truth themselves. A rope rather than a sword. A mirror rather than a judgment. Yet it walks a fine edge. Used without care, it becomes manipulation. Used with wisdom, it becomes revelation. What makes ironia so unsettling is its quietness. It doesn't shout. It smiles. It nods. It plays small while watching everything. And when the moment comes, it asks a single, innocent question, one that cracks certainty open and leaves the soul standing naked, not before an enemy, but before itself. Nomos is the invisible hand that shapes a world, not through force, but through agreement, repetition, and the quiet weight of tradition. In ancient Greek thought, nomos meant law, but not just the written rules of courts and kings. It was custom, convention, the shared rhythm of a society's breath. Nomos told people what was right, what was sacred, what was shameful, often without needing to say a word. It is the boundary that keeps chaos at bay, the code that binds strangers into citizens. Nomos teaches a child what to fear, what to honor, what to become. It can uplift, but it can also suffocate. Because nomos doesn't ask for truth, it asks for order. It doesn't care if the gods still speak, only that the temples stay full. It doesn't care if the laws are just, only that they are followed. Sophocles warned what happens when nomos and nature collide. When a higher truth whispers one thing, but the city demands another. Antigone buried her brother because the unwritten divine law in her blood outweighed the human nomos above her head. And in that clash, the tragedy unfolded. Nomos is not eternal. It changes, slowly, violently, invisibly. What was once sacred becomes absurd. What was once forbidden becomes expected. And still, nomos remains, reshaping itself, whispering, "This is how things are." But behind every nomos is a question few dare ask. Who decided this, and why do we still obey? Because sometimes the most dangerous chains are the ones that feel like home. Physis. Physis is not just nature. It is the force inside all things that becomes. To the ancient Greeks, physis was the pulse of life itself, the invisible principle that makes a seed reach toward the sun, that makes rivers carve stone, that makes a child become a man, and a soul yearn to be whole. It is not mechanical. It is not random. Physis is the silent unfolding of what something is, driven by what it is meant to be. It does not shout. It grows. Before science reduced nature to matter, physis was alive, It was seen as divine, intelligent, not in thought, but in direction. Every being carried within it the shape of its becoming. The acorn already contained the oak, the human, the philosopher, and Phasis was the law that moved it forward, not from force, but from essence. To go against Phasis was not rebellion, it was decay. To align with it was to thrive, to flourish, to fulfill one's nature. But Phasis is not always gentle. Growth breaks things. It cracks skin, splits bark, sheds identity, and it never stops. Even in stillness, Phasis pushes forward. Even in silence, it expands. It is not content with survival. It seeks form. It seeks excellence. And it never apologizes for the violence of becoming. In a world addicted to control, Phasis remains untamed. You cannot master it. You can only listen, watch, surrender. Because Phasis is not outside of you. It is you. Every instinct, every ache, every breath is a reminder. Something in you is still becoming. Something in you still knows how to grow. Techne. Techne is the ancient heartbeat of creation, the disciplined knowledge of how to do, how to make, how to shape the world with hands guided by understanding. It is more than skill, more than talent. Techne is art as mastery, craft as philosophy. For the Greeks, it bridged the divide between thought and action. A sculptor carving marble, a physician setting bone, a shipbuilder reading wind. Techne was the sacred knowledge that turned raw matter into meaning. Unlike mere labor, techne was intentional. It carried purpose. It followed patterns. A potter did not just make pots. He mirrored the order of the cosmos in clay. A playwright did not just tell stories. He balanced structure and chaos to reflect human truth. Techne was not about spontaneity. It was about the application of wisdom through form. It required memory, method, tradition, passed down, refined, repeated until the hand and the mind were one. Plato both revered and feared techne. He saw its beauty, but also its seduction. A craftsman could make what seemed good, even if it wasn't. A speaker could use rhetoric, the techne of persuasion, to distort truth. In this tension, the Greeks saw the shadow in the brilliance, the risk of skill without virtue. But techne is also liberation. It is the proof that human hands can echo divine order, that through discipline, attention, and care, we can create what lasts beyond us. To master techne is not just to build, it is to become, to participate in something larger, to bring forth form from the formless and leave behind a world changed, if only slightly, by what we knew how to do. Dike. Dike is not just justice. It is the trembling balance that holds the universe together. In ancient Greek thought, Dike was both a goddess and a principle, the living force that ensured harmony between heaven and earth, gods and men, soul and action. She is not blind like modern justice. She sees. She watches the steps of mortals and marks where they stray. She doesn't punish out of vengeance. She restores what has been broken. She realigns what has fallen out of order. In her highest form, Dike is cosmic law, the rhythm of rightness that underlies everything. When a king grows arrogant, when a city becomes corrupt, when a person lives falsely, it is Dike who begins the quiet correction. Not always through law, but through consequence, through unraveling, through fall. She is not bound to courts. She is not limited to verdicts. She moves through fate, through decay, through shame, through time. She waits. And then she strikes, not to destroy, but to rebalance. But Dike also lives in the soul. When a person feels the ache of guilt, the pull to confess, the need to set something right, that is Dike speaking. She is the voice behind conscience, the pressure behind virtue, not imposed from above, but arising from within. Her justice is not about punishment, it's about return. Return to harmony, to right action, to truth. And yet, when ignored, Dike becomes wrath. The longer imbalance is tolerated, the harder she swings back. Because she is not a wish, she is a law. And everything, sooner or later, answers to her. Cosmos. Cosmos is not just the universe, it is the beauty of its order. In ancient Greek thought, cosmos meant more than the sum of stars and planets. It meant arrangement, harmony, balance. The very structure of existence woven together with elegance so profound, the soul could feel it before it understood it. Cosmos was not chaos tamed. It was the opposite of chaos, a sacred geometry that whispered, "Everything belongs where it is." To look at the night sky and feel awe, that was to feel cosmos. To see justice in action, rhythm in music, proportion in architecture, that too was cosmos. It is the pattern that binds the vast and the small, the divine and the mortal, into one coherent dance. It is why the ancients believed the body could mirror the stars, why cities were laid out with purpose, why a virtuous soul was seen as cosmically aligned. Cosmos was not only out there, it was in here. But cosmos is not static. Its beauty comes from balance in motion. Planets move, lives rise and fall, empires collapse, and yet the whole remains whole. The Greeks feared disorder not just because it was ugly, but because it violated the very nature of reality. To live against cosmos was to fracture not just society, but the soul. And yet, cosmos is not enforced. It is invited. It calls through silence, through symmetry, through the strange peace that descends when the inside and outside finally match. To live well was to live in cosmos, and to stray from it was to feel the ache of being out of tune, with the world and with oneself. Eros. Eros is not simple love. It is the fire beneath love, the ache, the hunger, the madness that drives the soul to reach beyond itself. In ancient thought, Eros was not just a god of desire. He was a force of becoming. He shatters peace. He ignites motion. He pulls opposites together with unbearable tension, not to soothe, but to awaken. Eros does not ask politely. He seizes the heart, consumes the mind, and leaves behind a yearning so deep it feels like absence carved into flesh. To Plato, Eros was the ladder of ascent, the longing that begins in beauty of the body, but climbs toward beauty of the soul, then to truth, and finally to the divine. But it always begins with lack. Eros is born of poverty and plenty, always craving, never full. He is the wound that seeks healing in another, the emptiness that drives the artist, the mystic, the lover to chase what cannot be held. This longing is dangerous. Eros can elevate or destroy. It can bind soul to soul or turn passion into obsession. It can lead to transcendence or burn everything to ash. And yet, without Eros, there is no movement, no creation, no revelation. He is the whisper that says, "There is more." The pull that drags the soul out of comfort, out of safety, out of itself. Eros is not satisfaction. He is the search, the divine unrest, the trembling force that makes a person fall in love with a face, an idea, a god, not to possess it, but to be transformed by the fire it leaves behind. Thanatos. Thanatos is not just death, it is the cold longing for it. In ancient Greek myth, Thanatos was the god of peaceful death, the silent twin of Hypnos, sleep. But in the deeper layers of philosophy and psychology, Thanatos became something far more haunting. The inner pull toward destruction, stillness, release. Freud later echoed the idea as the death drive, the unconscious force that moves beneath our instincts for pleasure and survival, whispering for silence, for ending, for rest. Thanatos is not murder. It is not violence. It is the slow desire to let go, to disappear, to sink beneath the noise of existence. It is the weariness that grows when life's struggles feel endless. the numbness after grief, the quiet thought that asks, what if I just stopped? In contrast to Eros, the drive to love, connect, and create, Thanatos pulls in the opposite direction, toward isolation, reduction, undoing. It is not evil. It is not a villain. It is the dark twin of life itself. But Thanatos wears many masks. He hides in addiction, in self-sabotage, in the compulsion to repeat old wounds, in the comfort of apathy. He can be seductive, not because he is loud, but because he offers stillness, relief, an end to striving, and when left unchecked, he can dissolve a life slowly, without anyone noticing. Yet to know. Thanatos is not to be doomed. It is to see clearly the truth most run from, that all things end, that we are moving toward silence and must choose how to meet it, not with fear, but with fire, not by surrendering to Thanatos, but by understanding him, because only by facing death, within and without, can life be fully lived. Pistis. Pistis is not blind belief. It is the deep-rooted trust that binds soul to soul, citizen to city, mortal to divine. In the ancient Greek world, pistis was more than religious faith. It was the glue of all meaningful relationships. It was loyalty given not because of proof, but because of presence. A sacred confidence that what cannot yet be seen is still true. Pistis lives in the space between evidence and action. It is the moment the heart steps forward, even when the path is hidden. To give pistis is to risk, to open, to commit. It is what lovers exchange when promises are made, what warriors give to comrades when shields are raised, what the philosopher grants to the unseen order of the cosmos. It is not passive. It is not naive. Pistis is a choice. A steady voice within that says, I will hold on, even when the ground shakes. In early Greek tragedies, the collapse of pistis marked the fall of kings and the unraveling of cities. When trust was broken, between gods and mortals, leaders and followers, chaos erupted. Because pistis is more than a feeling. It is a contract of the soul. It builds nations. It births revolutions. It sanctifies silence between two people who understand each other without speaking. And in the realm of the divine, pistis becomes even more powerful. To trust in what cannot be touched. To kneel not before certainty, but mystery. That is pistis at its highest form. It asks for no proof. It gives no guarantees. But when it moves through a person, it becomes strength, the kind that walks into fire without needing to see what lies on the other side. Mythos. Mythos is the soul of a culture whispered through story, the ancient current of meaning that flows beneath logic, beneath fact, beneath the surface of things. It is not a lie. It is not mere entertainment. Mythos is narrative truth, carried through generations not to explain the world scientifically, but to reveal it symbolically. Where logos dissects, mythos binds. Where reason analyzes, mythos remembers. To the Greeks, mythos was how gods walked among men, how the heavens spoke in thunder, how the depths of the human heart were made visible through gods, monsters, and heroes. In myth, truth is not literal. It is felt. It lives in metaphor. It speaks in image. A child does not need to be taught what Prometheus means. The fire stealer who suffers for his gift. He is the human condition. Defiance, punishment, hope. Mythos is not static. It evolves, shifts, takes new forms. But its function is eternal. It gives shape to what the mind cannot hold alone. Love, death, fate, guilt, transcendence. A society without mythos may be advanced, but it becomes rootless, brilliant in facts, starving for meaning. Mythos teaches not what the world is, but what it feels like to live in it. And inside every person, mythos still stirs. In dreams, in fears that make no sense, in the sudden tears at a story we've heard 100 times. These are not weaknesses. They are signals from the deep. Mythos speaks when logic is not enough, when we are no longer looking for answers, but for belonging, for connection, for truth that breathes. Sophia. Sophia is not knowledge. It is the divine wisdom that breathes before thought, the sacred knowing that cannot be taught, only remembered. In ancient philosophy, Sophia was not just an idea. She was a presence, a feminine force older than reason, deeper than logic, softer than truth, but sharper than any blade. Sophia does not shout. She whispers through silence, through symbols, through dreams that stay long after waking. She is not the voice of the scholar. She is the gaze of the mystic, the stillness beneath understanding. To the Greeks, Sophia was the highest virtue, the crown of the soul, the destination of philosophy itself. She is not cleverness, not wit. She is insight born from inner clarity, the kind of knowing that comes after the world has failed you, after answers collapse, after grief has carved the soul open enough for light to enter. Sophia is the truth that doesn't need to be proven because it feels like returning home. She is often confused with intelligence, but Sophia moves slower, gentler. Her wisdom is not fast, not loud. It watches, waits, and when the time is right, it speaks once, and everything changes. It is Sophia who tells you when to let go, when to forgive, when to stop running. It is Sophia who holds the paradoxes in her hands and smiles because she is not trying to solve them. She is trying to live them. Sophia is divine, not because she is unreachable, but because she is already inside you, quiet, patient, eternal, waiting for the moment when knowledge finally becomes wisdom, and the soul remembers what it always knew. Gnosis. Gnosis is not information, it is awakening. It is the shattering moment when the soul remembers what it never learned, when truth is not discovered but unveiled. Gnosis, in the ancient mystical traditions, especially Gnosticism, is inner knowledge, direct, intimate, and transformative. It does not come from books, from teachers, from rituals. It comes from within. A piercing clarity that breaks through illusion like light through stained glass. Gnosis does not whisper facts. It screams reality. It tears off the masks of the world, the false self, the systems of control, the layers of sleep we mistake for life. It reveals that we are not who we were told we are, that the divine was never far away. It lived inside us, waiting for silence, waiting for surrender, waiting for the soul to stop chasing and start seeing. But Gnosis is not safe. It is not soft. It is not polite. It burns. It isolates. The one who wakes up through Gnosis often finds themselves a stranger to the world. Its customs feel hollow, its noise unbearable. Because once truth has been felt, there is no going back to pretending. In Gnostic myth, the world is a trap, a dream ruled by false powers. But Gnosis is the spark that breaks the spell. The soul, once asleep in matter, suddenly remembers its origin, light beyond light. And in that moment, freedom is no longer a theory. It is a knowing, fierce, irrefutable, holy. Gnosis cannot be taught. It can only be lived. And when it arrives, the one who receives it does not become better. They become real. Mimesis. Mimesis is the shadow that reflects the world. The ancient Greek idea that all art, thought, and human creation is, at its core, imitation. To the Greeks, especially Plato and Aristotle, mimesis wasn't just copying, it was how humans made sense of reality. Through painting, poetry, drama, even philosophy, we do not invent, we mirror. We reach out toward truth by recreating its shape. And yet, this imitation is both revelation and illusion. Plato feared mimesis. To him, it was dangerous. Reality itself was already an imitation of the eternal forms, perfect, unchanging truths. What artists made then were imitations of imitations, shadows of shadows. He warned, "The poet seduces the soul with beauty, but distances it from truth. Art distracts. It charms. It lies. And yet, the lie feels real. That's what makes it powerful and terrifying." But Aristotle saw something sacred in mimesis. He believed we are drawn to imitation because it teaches us, moves us. It lets us see suffering without being destroyed, heroism without having to bleed. In watching, we understand. In imitating, we become. Mimesis, then, is not a distortion. It's a bridge, a way for the soul to process truth through form. Mimesis is everywhere. The child mimicking a parent's voice, the actor channeling another's pain, the painter capturing not what the eye sees, but what the heart feels. It's how we love, how we learn, how we evolve. And yet, beneath every act of imitation, a question burns. Are we creating, or just remembering what the world already whispered to us in silence? Ergon Logos Alignment. Ergon Logos. Alignment is the soul's silent perfection, when what something does matches what it is, and both are governed by reason. In ancient philosophy, especially in Aristotle's thought, ergon is function, the unique work or purpose of a thing. Logos is reason, the guiding intelligence of the cosmos, the inner logic behind all movement and meaning. When a being's action, ergon, flows in harmony with the structure of logos, there is no friction, no confusion. There is only grace. This alignment is not theoretical. It is visceral. A musician who plays with both skill and heart. A judge who chooses justice not out of fear, but because it is right. A human being whose choices reflect the truth of their nature, rational, moral, purposeful. Ergon Logos. Alignment is the moment when thought, word, and deed collapse into one movement. There is no inner war, no pretending, no noise, only clarity. But this alignment must be earned. The soul must be tempered, by discipline, by suffering, by reflection. The appetites must be trained, not denied. The reason must be awakened, not memorized. This is not the peace of passivity. It is the stillness of mastery. And it burns. Because to align with Logos means saying no to comfort, no to chaos, no to everything that drags the self into disintegration. The world is full of motion without meaning, speed without direction, people who work, speak, strive, without knowing why. Ergon Logos. Alignment is the return to center, the rare condition where being and doing no longer compete, where the soul becomes whole, and the life becomes true. Kinesis. Kinesis is the breath of becoming, the ancient Greek concept of movement, change, transformation in motion. It is not random. It is not passive. Kinesis is the act of unfolding, the transition from potential to actual, from seed to bloom, from stillness to flame. Aristotle used kinesis to describe how everything in nature moves toward its own completion. A thing is not static. It is always on its way to becoming what it truly is. It is in the ripening of fruit, the trembling before decision, the silent shifting of stars across a night sky. Kinesis is time made visible, change made sacred. It is not always fast. Sometimes it is imperceptible. But it never stops. Even what appears still is becoming. The mountain erodes. The mind evolves. The soul unfolds its layers like a flower touched by heat. And in every moment of growth, decay, or awakening, kinesis breathes. But kinesis is not safe. It is what pulls the caterpillar out of its skin, what breaks bones so they can heal stronger, what drags the heart through heartbreak just to teach it how to love more deeply. It is the force that tears apart illusions, reshapes identities, and drives the human toward something unknown but necessary. Without kinesis, there is no story, only stasis. No birth, no fall, no return. And in every choice, every moment of change, there is a question trembling beneath the surface. Will you resist the movement, or let it carry you into the self you have not yet met? Because kinesis never waits. It is already in motion. So are you. Enkrateia. Enkrateia is not motion. It is being in full flame. In Aristotle's philosophy, enkrateia is the soul at work, the difference between a sleeping potential and a living reality. It is not just what something can do, it is the act of doing it. A blade lying still is not enkrateia. A blade slicing through air, fulfilling its purpose, is. It is the dancer mid-spin, the thinker lost in contemplation, the seed blooming into fruit. Not just being alive, but being alive in expression. Enkrateia is not chaos or mere busyness. It is motion with meaning. It is essence made visible. When potential, dynamis, becomes real, when the possible becomes actual, that is enkrateia. It is the difference between knowing a path and walking it, between talent held in silence and talent sung into the world. It is the self, no longer dreaming, no longer preparing, but becoming. And this becoming is electric. In enkrateia, the soul is not divided, it is aligned. A writer writing, a tree growing, a friend loving. There is no gap between what is felt and what is expressed. It is presence, it is power, it is purpose in motion. But enkrateia does not last forever. It flickers, it peaks, it fades, and that is why it matters. It asks, are you doing the thing you were made for? Are you moving in truth, or are you waiting? Because potential unexpressed dies quietly, but enkrateia lives loudly, and in its light, the soul remembers what it means to truly exist. Eclipsis. Eclipsis is not just an eclipse of the sun, it is the soul's experience of divine absence. In ancient thought, eclipsis was more than a celestial event. It was a cosmic warning, a sacred disruption, a moment when the light withdraws and something higher turns its face away. The Greeks saw eclipses as omens, as ruptures in the natural order, moments when the gods hid themselves, not out of wrath, but as a signal that something had gone wrong below. But eclipsis is not confined to the sky. It happens in the human spirit. It is the long silence after prayer, the darkness that follows betrayal, the hollow grief when meaning vanishes and the sacred feels far, unreachable, deaf. It is not despair. It is deeper. It is emptiness, not because something failed, but because something that once was, is no longer felt, and the absence itself becomes unbearable. Eclipsis strips away comfort, belief, illusion. In that terrible dimming, the soul stands exposed, fragile, questioning, desperate for warmth that no longer arrives. Some break under this absence, others search harder. For in this darkness there is a hidden invitation to seek the divine not in light, but in lack, not in presence, but in longing. Eclipsis reminds us that even the gods can go silent, that even the sun can turn its face away, and in that withdrawal we are tested. What do we hold to when the sacred disappears? Who do we become when the sky goes black and no voice answers back? It is in this darkness that faith is no longer a feeling, but a fire that must be lit by the soul itself. Dynamis. Dynamis is the power hidden in stillness, the ancient Greek idea of potential, of what could be but is not yet. It is the energy curled inside a seed, the strength sleeping in muscle, the fire waiting for a spark. To Aristotle, dynamis was one half of being, the unrealized half. It is not what is, but what can become, and that makes it sacred, dangerous, and profoundly human. Dynamis is everywhere, in the sculptor's block of marble, in the child staring at the stars, in the silence before a choice that will change everything. It holds the weight of every possible future, unshaped, unwritten, trembling with uncertainty. But Dynamis does nothing on its own. It needs motion, intention, courage. Without action, Dynamis dies in silence. It is potential wasted, brilliance unfelt, a life unlived. This is what makes Dynamis so haunting. Every person carries within them more than they ever become. The mind that never awakens, the love that's never spoken, the revolution that never begins. It is not fate that holds people back. It is the refusal to ignite Dynamis into Enkrateia, into action, into reality. And that refusal leaves echoes. Regret. What if? What might have been? But when Dynamis is awakened, the world changes. The timid voice becomes speech. The fear becomes fuel. The unseen becomes real. In that moment, Dynamis burns into being, and the soul steps into the space it was always meant to fill. The tragedy is not being small. The tragedy is forgetting that within your stillness, something vast still waits. Something with teeth. Something with wings. Something that can begin now. Apopteia. Apopteia is not numbness. It is the unshakable calm that remains when the soul no longer serves its emotions, but governs them. To the Stoics, Apopteia was the highest form of freedom, a state where external chaos could no longer disturb the inner citadel. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of slavery to feeling. Pain comes, praise comes, loss comes, but the soul, anchored in reason and virtue, does not flinch. This was not coldness, it was mastery. The Stoic sage did not suppress emotion through force, he transformed it through understanding. Anger became clarity, fear became caution, grief became reverence. Through Apopteia, emotions were no longer chains, but signals, gifts to be acknowledged, not obeyed. The world could shout, but the soul would not echo back unless it chose to. This kind of detachment feels radical in a world addicted to reaction. We are taught to follow our passions, to trust our outrage, to express every impulse. But Apopteia asks a different question. What do you control? And the answer, always, is yourself. Not others, not events. Only the space between stimulus and response. Only the mind that decides how to act in the storm. Apopteia is not peace that avoids pain. It is peace that walks straight through it, untouched at its core. The death of a loved one, the betrayal of a friend, the ruin of fortune, all become tests, not tragedies. Not because they don't hurt, but because they no longer define the soul. That is Apopteia. The fire burns, but it no longer consumes. Cosmopolis. Cosmopolis is the soul's rebellion against borders, the ancient Greek vision of the world as one city and every human as its rightful citizen. First spoken by the Stoic philosopher Diogenes, who when asked where he came from replied simply, "I am a citizen of the world." It was not a political slogan. It was a spiritual declaration, a rejection of tribalism, a refusal to shrink one's allegiance to birthplace, blood, or nation. Cosmopolis was not about erasing identity. It was about expanding it. To live as part of the cosmopolis is to see the stranger not as foreign, but as familiar. It is to understand that justice, reason, and virtue are not bound by soil. That truth is not different in Athens than it is in Babylon. That the suffering of a farmer in one land matters no less than the suffering of a king in another. The Stoics believed we are fragments of the divine fire scattered across the earth, not to compete, but to connect. But Cosmopolis is not easy. It demands more than tolerance. It demands responsibility. If all are kin, then all are worthy. If all are citizens, then all must be heard. In a world divided by flag, language, skin, and creed, Cosmopolis is a quiet act of resistance. It asks the soul, can you belong to more than your people? Can your empathy outgrow your tribe? To walk in the spirit of Cosmopolis is to carry no border within you, to see the sky as your ceiling, the earth as shared ground, and every face as part of a larger self still waking up to its unity. Ascesis. Ascesis is the forge of the soul, the ancient discipline of shaping the self through rigorous, intentional practice. It is not mere routine. It is not self-denial for punishment's sake. Ascesis is devotion in motion. To the Stoics, Cynics, and early Christians, it was the sacred labor of becoming, of taking one's raw, impulsive, chaotic nature and refining it into something luminous, sharp, and free. It was philosophy made flesh. Ascesis demands repetition. It thrives in silence. It begins when comfort ends. It is the early rising, the cold water, the fasted stomach, the thoughts held in check before they erupt into action. It is the choice, day after day, to live by principle rather than pleasure. Not because pleasure is wrong, but because it cannot lead. Ascesis is the weight carried not for show, but for strength. It is effort without applause, suffering without spectacle, clarity without noise. But the purpose is not suffering, it is transformation. Through ascesis, the soul learns to endure, to focus, to let go. It is the sacred stripping away of the unnecessary until only the essential remains. Ascesis prepares the soul for stillness, for resilience, for truth. Without it, the highest ideals remain theory. With it, they become action. Habit. Character. It is a slow-burning path. It is lonely. It often feels thankless. But those who walk it carry something unshakable. Their peace is not inherited. It is earned. And their strength does not shout. It radiates. Ascesis is the sacred rebellion against chaos, the daily ritual of remembering. I am not finished. I am still being made. Nomothetes. Nomothetes is not merely a lawmaker. It is the architect of order, the one who dares to carve civilization out of chaos. In ancient Greece, the nomothetes was a sacred figure, not just a politician, but a visionary. Someone who stepped between gods and men, between instinct and justice, and laid down the rules by which a society could live. These laws were not arbitrary. They were mirrors of cosmic harmony, attempts to channel divine reason into human life. To be a nomothetes was to hold terrifying power. Every word etched into law was a blade. It could cut through cruelty or create it. It could elevate a people or chain them. Solon. Lycurgus. These were not just men. They were midwives of identity, builders of moral architecture. They didn't just write laws. They wrote souls. Because a people become what they are told is just. What they are taught is sacred. What they are allowed to dream. But the burden was heavy. A true nomothetes had to see beyond their time, beyond vengeance, beyond wealth, beyond popularity. They had to ask, what does this people need to become more than what they are? The answer was never simple. Sometimes it meant mercy. Other times it meant fire. Always it meant sacrifice. And in a deeper sense, the role of nomothetes lives on in each person. Every time a choice is made that shapes a life. Every time a line is drawn between who one was and who one must now become. To give oneself new laws is the most dangerous act of all, because once they are written, the soul must obey. Or break. Daemonion. Daemonion is the whisper that interrupts the noise, the divine inner guide that speaks not in thunder, but in restraint. For Socrates, it was not a god outside him, but a presence within, a quiet voice that never told him what to do, only what not to. It warned. It nudged. It withheld approval when a step was wrong. Daemonion was not his conscience. It was something older, something other. A sacred thread between the soul and the divine, invisible but unmistakably real. This was not imagination, not wishful thinking. Socrates trusted his daemonion more than the laws of the city, more than the opinions of the wise, more than fear itself. When it spoke, he obeyed. When it was silent, he proceeded. It did not argue. It did not explain. It simply said, no. And that no carried more weight than 1,000 reasons. The idea of a daemonion is both comforting and terrifying. It suggests that within each person lives a sliver of the divine, a guide not made of rules or doctrines, but of presence. A knowing that does not come from logic, but from somewhere deeper. To ignore it is to fracture the self. To follow it is to walk a path that no one else can see, but one that always leads to alignment. Modern minds have no word for it. We call it instinct, intuition, a gut feeling. But in truth, it is older than thought. It is the God that does not demand worship, only listening. The divine that does not hover above, but breathes beneath the skin. And when all else fails, it remains, the quiet voice saying, "This is not the way." Eunoia. Eunoia is the gentlest power, the ancient Greek word for beautiful thinking, for goodwill so pure it bends the world without force. It is not kindness as weakness, nor flattery dressed in charm. Eunoia is the quiet strength of benevolence, the inner posture of a mind that wishes well, even when no one sees. It is what remains when pride dissolves, when ego steps aside, when the soul no longer needs to win, but only to understand. To the Greeks, especially in rhetoric and ethics, eunoia was more than a virtue. It was persuasion without manipulation. A speaker with eunoia did not conquer hearts. They earned them. Because behind their words lived sincerity. Their arguments didn't slice. They invited. In courts, in politics, in philosophy, eunoia was the fragrance that made reason tolerable. It was the calm after fury, the warmth that made truth easier to hold. But eunoia begins deeper, long before the mouth speaks. It lives in the heart that chooses grace when it has every right to resent. In the mind that, even when wronged, still hopes the other might grow. It's not naivety. It's vision. The belief that people are not fixed, that even pain can birth understanding, that peace is stronger than dominance. Eunoia is rare because it asks so much. Patience in the face of provocation, generosity in the presence of pettiness, and most of all, the refusal to let bitterness shape the soul. Yet when it flows, it transforms. Because beautiful thinking does more than decorate the mind. It heals the world around it, word by word, breath by breath. Nostalgia for the Logos. Nostalgia for the Logos is the deep, aching hunger for a world that made sense. A yearning not for the past, but for a time when meaning felt embedded in every breath, every star, every word. Logos was the divine order, the rational structure of the cosmos, the invisible thread that bound thought to being, word to world, soul to truth. To lose that Logos is not just to lose faith, it is to lose orientation. It is to float, anchorless, in a world that no longer speaks. The ancient philosophers believed the universe once sang, that through Logos, the mind could align with the harmony of the all. That reason was not just a tool, but a bridge, allowing the soul to step into rhythm with creation itself. But modernity silenced the music. Logos was buried beneath data, noise, opinion. Truth was fractured. Language no longer pointed upward. It bent inward, broke apart. And now, the soul remembers something it cannot name. This nostalgia is not weakness, it is recognition. It rises when a person stands beneath a star-lit sky and feels the order, even if they cannot explain it. It stirs when reading ancient texts, hearing the voice of a world that believed words could mirror reality. It haunts the philosopher who still asks, is there structure beneath the chaos? And it wounds those who see beauty and sense that it meant something, once. Nostalgia for the Logos is the soul remembering its homeland. Not a place, but a clarity. A time when thought was sacred, speech was alignment, and to know was to return to something already within. Something now dimmed, but not extinguished. Anthropos. Anthropos is not just man, it is the being who wonders what it means to be. In ancient philosophy, Anthropos stood apart from the animals, not because of strength or instinct, but because of consciousness, because of the unbearable ability to reflect, to ask, to seek. The Anthropos is the one who looks at the stars and feels both awe and terror. The one who hears the question, "Who am I?" and cannot silence it. To be Anthropos is to be haunted by the mystery of the self. The Greeks saw Anthropos as the bridge between gods and beasts. Too wise to live blindly, too fragile to live divinely. Caught in tension, pulled by hunger, elevated by logos. Always reaching for something beyond, truth, justice, beauty, but weighed down by fear, pride, and flesh. The Anthropos is tragic, noble, incomplete. But this incompleteness is sacred. It is not a flaw, it is a calling. The Anthropos is not born finished. The soul must be shaped. The mind must be sharpened. The heart must be broken and rebuilt. And through this unfolding, the human becomes something more than biology, more than history. The human becomes philosophical, not because of answers, but because of the courage to live the questions. Anthropos is the one who stares into the void and does not look away, who creates meaning in a world that offers none freely, who suffers, yes, but transforms suffering into art, into ethics, into truth. To be Anthropos is not simply to exist, it is to become conscious of existence, and to carry that awareness like a flame, even when the wind tries to kill it. Panpsychism. Panpsychism is the ancient, unsettling belief that nothing is truly lifeless, that everything, from the stars in the sky to the stone beneath your feet, carries some whisper of consciousness. To the pre-Socratic thinkers, to the Stoics, to the mystics of East and West, the universe was not a machine, it was alive. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. Every atom a flicker of awareness, every grain of sand, every tree, every river, not just in the world, but aware of being in it. This is not the belief that everything thinks as humans do. It is subtler, stranger. It means that awareness is not an emergent property of complexity. It is the fabric of reality itself. Mind does not arise from matter. Matter is already steeped in mind. The wind knows how to move. The flower knows how to turn. The fire knows how to reach. Not because they reason, but because they feel, in some unfathomably quiet way. Panpsychism shatters the illusion of separateness. If all things carry soul, then nothing is truly dead. Nothing is truly other. The wall between subject and object begins to dissolve. To harm a forest is not just ecological, it is spiritual. To walk upon the earth is to walk upon something aware of your presence. And yet, modern minds recoil. We've been taught to see matter as dumb, dead, meaningless. But panpsychism lingers like a ghost. In myths, in dreams, in the strange way the world seems to respond when we finally listen. It asks, what if the world is watching? What if the cosmos is not a stage, but a presence? A presence we've been living inside all along. Alethos bios. Alethos bios means the true life, not just existence, but a life in truth. For the ancient philosophers, especially the Platonists and Stoics, this was not about success, wealth, or pleasure. It was about alignment, living in harmony with what is, not what we pretend. The alethos bios is not loud. It does not chase status. It is quiet, disciplined, fearless. It is a life stripped of illusion, rooted in clarity, guided by reason, and held together by integrity so deep it cannot be bought, flattered, or frightened. The one who lives the true life does not ask, "What do others think of me?" They ask, "Is this right?" They do not live for comfort, because comfort is fleeting. They live for coherence, between word and deed, thought and action, soul and world. Their joy is not in things, but in truth showing up in their body. Every step becomes a kind of prayer. Every decision, a carving toward freedom. But this life costs. It demands that lies be left behind, especially the ones we tell ourselves. It confronts the ego, the mask, the endless hunger to be admired. It will take your reputation. It may take your safety. It will not give you applause, but it will give you peace, the kind that cannot be shaken. And in that stillness, you will recognize yourself. Not the self you built for others, but the one that was always there. Aletheus bios is not a destination. It is a decision, made again and again, to live as if the soul matters more than the world. Because it does. Thanatology. Thanatology is the dark mirror the soul avoids. The study, the philosophy, the confrontation with death in all its forms. Not just the end of breath, but the unraveling of identity, the loss of meaning, the quiet terror of knowing that everything will one day fall silent. The ancient philosophers didn't flinch from death. They stared straight into it. For them, to philosophize was to learn how to die, because only in the shadow of death does life become real, urgent, honest. Thanatology is not obsession with dying. It is a ruthless inquiry into what death reveals. It asks, who are you without your body? What remains when your name is forgotten, your voice unheard, your image gone? It tears away illusions of permanence, strips the ego bare, and whispers that every pleasure, every plan, every heartbeat is borrowed. And yet, within this rawness, there is power. The Stoics used death not to despair, but to sharpen. Memento mori was not morbidity, it was clarity. If death is coming, and it is, then what deserves your time, your fear, your love? Thanatology holds the knife to the throat of distraction and asks, what are you really doing here? It doesn't offer comfort. It doesn't promise reunion or redemption. It offers truth, that you will end, that everything you love will end, and that this makes it more beautiful, not less. In facing death, something awakens, a strange peace, a strange urgency, a strange freedom. Because when death is no longer denied, life is no longer wasted, and in the presence of the end, the soul begins, at last, to live. Metensomatosis. Metensomatosis is the soul's secret journey, the ancient belief that after death, the soul does not vanish, but moves, slipping from one body to the next in an endless chain of becoming. Unlike mere reincarnation, metensomatosis is deeper, stranger, more haunting. It is not about reward or punishment. It is not about memory or justice. It is about the soul as a traveler, changing form, shape, identity, forever searching for something it cannot name. To the Pythagoreans, this was not fantasy. It was law. The soul was immortal, but it never stood still. After death, it passed into another form. A human, an animal, even a plant. And through each life, it carried something. A resonance. A subtle imprint of all it had been before. You may not remember being a soldier, a thief, a bird, or a slave. But somewhere in your instincts, your fears, your longings, that echo remains. Metensomatosis shatters the illusion of individuality. If the soul wears many masks, then identity is not fixed, it is fluid. The person you are today is only one thread in a tapestry far older, far vaster than the body you inhabit. This life is not your beginning, and it may not be your end. But this belief is not comforting, It is unsettling. Because if the soul does not rest, if it keeps moving, then there is no finish line. Only motion, only change, only the endless unfolding of what it means to be conscious again and again in 1,000 forgotten forms. Metensomatosis is not a promise. It is a question. Who were you before this name? And what will you become when this one fades? Nikean ethics. Nikean ethics is the fierce belief that values are not born in peace, but in struggle. Rooted in the philosophy of Heraclitus, this view holds that conflict, nikos, is not a flaw in the world, it is the engine of it. Harmony is not soft, it is tension held just tightly enough not to snap. According to this ethic, justice, courage, wisdom, none arise from comfort. They are forged in fire, shaped in opposition, tested by resistance. The soul becomes noble, not by avoiding conflict, but by enduring it, by becoming through it. Nikean ethics is not a call to violence, it is a call to truth. It teaches that good and evil are not static categories, but opposing forces constantly at war, shaping one another like blacksmith and flame. Without opposition, values decay into slogans. Without friction, the self never sharpens. Every virtue must first pass through trial, contradiction, failure. There is no honesty without betrayal, no strength without breaking, no wisdom without suffering. Heraclitus said war is the father of all things. Nikean ethics agrees, but sees this war not just in nations, but within every individual soul. The war between desire and discipline, between cowardice and action, between who you are and who you pretend to be. And it's in that battlefield that ethics are not chosen, but earned. It offers no ease. It promises no final victory. But it reveals a world where even chaos has a rhythm, and conflict is not the death of meaning, but its birthplace. And in that crucible, something stronger than comfort begins to rise. Character, built in fire, not in peace. Arche. Arche is the first breath, the primal principle, the origin, the beginning from which all things come and to which all things return. In the earliest Greek philosophy, it was not merely a starting point in time, but a foundational substance, a cosmic root. Thales said it was water. Anaximenes said it was air. Heraclitus said fire. But beyond elements, Arche meant something deeper. The unseen force behind the visible world, the unchanging source of all changing things. To ask about the arche is not to ask how something began, but why it holds together at all. Why does the world not dissolve into nothing? What lies beneath matter, motion, form? What sings beneath the surface of stars? Arche is not a god with a name. It does not speak. It is. And from it, the universe unfolds, not by accident, but by necessity. Every philosopher had their own answer. For some, it was a substance. For others, a principle, like number, or reason, or unity. But the question was always the same. What is the ground of being? The Greeks knew that to understand the arche was to understand the structure of existence itself, not its decoration, its root, not its story, its source. And yet, the more one contemplates the arche, the more it slips through the fingers. Because whatever it is, it precedes language, it lies behind thought. It is the silence before creation, the breath before the word. It is not what the world looks like. It is why the world is at all. And it is still here, beneath every moment, quietly holding everything together. Logos. Logos is not just reason. It is the divine architecture beneath all things. In ancient Greek philosophy, especially in Heraclitus, the Stoics, and later Christian and Neoplatonic thought, Logos was the invisible order that makes the universe knowable. It is the breath behind structure, the pulse behind law, the meaning behind matter. Logos is what makes fire burn, rivers flow, minds think, and justice matter. It is not invented by humans. It is discovered, Always there, beneath the noise, like a buried melody, the soul somehow remembers. Heraclitus called it the ever-living fire, the logic that governs change. The Stoics believed it dwelled in all things, like a divine reason saturating matter, guiding stars, seasons, and thought alike. To live in alignment with Logos was not just wisdom, it was salvation. Because Logos doesn't just explain the world, it calls to the soul. It invites you to live not reactively, but consciously, intentionally. To live as part of the design, not against it. But Logos is not always easy to hear. It is subtle, covered by chaos, buried under impulse and illusion. And yet, when the mind quiets, Logos speaks. In the elegance of mathematics, in the rhythm of language, in the silence between thoughts. It is the feeling that something fits, that truth is not just true, but beautiful. That justice isn't just agreed upon, it's real. To deny Logos is to drift in noise. To follow it is to return, not to dogma, but to structure, to meaning, to the deep cosmic realization that reason is not cold, it is sacred, and it has always been there, waiting for the soul to remember its shape. Zoe. Zoe is life. Not the kind measured by breath or heartbeat, but the eternal life force that is, always, everywhere, beneath all becoming. In ancient Greek thought, especially among the mystics and early Christians, Zoe was distinct from bios, the individual, temporal life of a person. While bios ends, Zoe does not. Zoe is the source behind the pulse. It is not your story. It is what allows your story to happen at all. Zoe is not life that can be owned. It is not survival. It is not career, status, body. It is deeper, wider, untouched by time. A tree grows by Zoe. A flame flickers by Zoe. A soul continues, past trauma, past death, because of Zoe. It does not fear decay, because it does not belong to the material. It animates flesh, but it is not flesh. It enters you at birth, but it was never born. When mystics speak of divine light, when poets write of something sacred moving through the world, it is Zoe they are touching. It is the reason silence sometimes feels full. The reason certain moments shimmer with presence. It is not something to be chased, but remembered. Because it's already there, beneath the noise, beneath the ego, beating like a second heart. Constant, quiet, unbreakable. Zoe cannot be taken, only veiled. And when the veil lifts, through love, suffering, revelation, Zoe floods back in. Not as a thought, but as a knowing. That even when everything falls apart, something in you remains. Alive, holy, untouched. Not just living, but life itself. Bios. Bios is not just life, it is a life, a shape, a story, a thread of time woven with choice, struggle, and form. In ancient Greek thought, bios was distinct from Zoe, the raw, eternal spark of life itself. Bios is life lived, measured, visible, defined by character, habit, and fate. It is the human journey from birth to death, filled with memory, identity, and the weight of becoming someone in particular. Zoe is breath. Bios is biography. Bios is the fragile miracle of being you, in this body, in this moment, with your scars, your voice, your name. It carries with it the pressures of time, culture, responsibility. A tree lives through Zoe. A person, through bios. Because bios is shaped not just by living, but by choosing how to live. It's not existence, it's direction. It's what you do with the days given to you, how you carve meaning into the structure of time. But bios is also haunted. It ends. It forgets. It fails. It carries the weight of death, the tension of knowing that all its beauty, its effort, its story, will pass. That everything it builds, loves, and defines will one day be dust. And yet, it matters, because in that limitation, it becomes sacred. Bios is the life that can be lost, and so must be lived deliberately. It asks not just, are you alive? But how are you living? What form is your life taking? What rhythm? What virtue? What voice? Bios is the trace the soul leaves behind, a shape the world remembers, for a moment, before it fades. Euthymia. Euthymia is the rare, radiant state of inner calm, a quiet joy that comes not from what happens to you, but from what settles within you. To the Stoics, especially Seneca, euthymia was not ecstasy, not pleasure, not the noisy thrill of success. It was contentment rooted in clarity. The kind of peace that arrives when a person no longer chases every voice, every trend, every shifting opinion, but stands firm in the center of their own soul. It is not apathy. It is not withdrawal. Euthymia is the strength to move through life without losing yourself in it. It is the whisper that says, I know who I am, even when the world shouts otherwise. It is the serenity of a person whose mind is not tugged in 1,000 directions, whose purpose is not borrowed, whose values are not for sale. But this stillness does not come cheaply. It demands the letting go of comparison, the release of craving, the refusal to live by someone else's definition of success. It is built slowly, through discipline, through solitude, through the repeated choice to return to what is essential. In euthymia, there is no rush, no pretending, just a deep, unshakable ease, like a lake untroubled by wind. A joy not because everything is perfect, but because nothing inside is fighting anymore. And when you meet someone with euthymia, you feel it, not in their words, but in their presence. They do not need to prove. They simply are, and that, in a world of noise, is its own kind of music. Paideia. Paideia is not schooling. It is the sculpting of a human soul. In ancient Greece, paideia meant more than learning. It meant transformation. It was a lifelong shaping of mind, body, and spirit into something noble, disciplined, free. Not just the transfer of facts, but the cultivation of character. To undergo paideia was to be led from raw potential into formed personhood. It was philosophy, poetry, gymnastics, music, politics, ethics, all woven into the architecture of a single soul. This education wasn't private. It was cultural. The city, the laws, the heroes, the tragedies, all taught the citizen how to feel, how to speak, how to be. Paideia wasn't just about what you knew. It was about who you were becoming. It aimed to raise not specialists, but complete humans, capable of courage, justice, reason, and beauty. Every discipline was a mirror, showing the student what was possible within them. But paideia was not gentle. It demanded self-overcoming. It exposed ignorance, burned away arrogance, and carved virtue where comfort once lived. It believed that without formation, freedom was dangerous, and that only through inner order could one contribute to outer order. In a world of shortcuts, noise, and surface brilliance, paideia feels radical. It refuses to separate intellect from morality, knowledge from virtue, excellence from humility. It is the quiet, daily act of returning to the question, what kind of human are you shaping in yourself? And more deeply, is it worthy of the life you've been given? Eklektikos. Eklektikos is the art of choosing, not randomly, not lazily, but with fierce discernment. In ancient philosophy, the eklektikos thinker was not loyal to any one school, not Plato, not Aristotle, not the Stoics or the Epicureans, but pulled truths from all of them, extracting what was essential and leaving the rest behind. It was a practice of philosophical alchemy, fusing fragments of brilliance into a personal system, a worldview not inherited, but forged. To be eklektikos was to refuse dogma, to stand at the crossroads of tradition and say, what is useful here? What is true? What survives the fire of lived experience? This was not relativism. It was not indifference. It was a deeper loyalty to wisdom itself, not to the robes it wore. But eklektikos is a hard path. It demands that the thinker be awake, always, not comforted by systems, but willing to test each idea against reality. It is slower. It is lonelier. But it builds something honest. It honors the fact that no single doctrine holds all truth, that insight is scattered like stars across centuries, cultures, and contradictions. And the true philosopher is the one who gathers them, not to imitate, but to integrate. Eklektikos is not about being clever. It is about being free. Free to admit where one system fails, where another begins to shine. Free to evolve. Free to reshape the self through what resonates, not what's required. It is the courage to build a philosophy not out of loyalty to the past, but out of fierce commitment to what still speaks in the present. Doxa is not truth. It is what pretends to be. In ancient Greek thought, especially in the philosophy of Plato, doxa meant common opinion, popular belief, the fragile layer of assumptions that most people mistake for reality. It is what crowds cheer, what culture repeats, what tradition hands down without question. Doxa is everywhere, on tongues, in headlines, in inherited values, and yet it is shallow. It comforts the mind by silencing the need to think. To Plato, doxa was the enemy of episteme, true knowledge. While episteme is carved from rigorous inquiry and direct experience of reality, doxa is built from hearsay, imitation, surface impressions. It is the flicker of shadows on the wall of the cave. The mind accepts it because it is easier than climbing into the light. And yet, doxa feels like certainty. That's what makes it so dangerous. It speaks with conviction, but lacks foundation. But doxa is not only deception, it is also the beginning. Every philosopher starts in doxa. Every soul raised in a society must first believe what it's told. The tragedy is not that people begin in doxa. It is when they never leave, when they stop asking, stop doubting, stop seeking. Doxa becomes a cage that looks like home, and yet, it can be shattered. One question, one contradiction, one glimpse beyond the veil, and doxa cracks. What was once obvious becomes absurd, and in that moment, the soul wakes up. Not into certainty, but into searching. And in the ruins of belief, truth begins to whisper. Now, begin again. Dialectic. Dialectic is not debate. It is not victory. It is the ancient art of truth through tension, a reasoned dialogue where two minds collide not to win, but to reveal. Born in the fire of Socratic inquiry, dialectic is the disciplined unraveling of belief. It begins not with answers, but with questions. Not with ego, but with a willingness to be wrong. In its purest form, it is two souls stepping into the unknown together, armed only with reason, humility, and the courage to let go of certainty. Socrates wielded dialectic like a scalpel. He asked, "What do you mean?" and kept asking, until the illusion cracked, until the hollow confidence bled out, until what remained was either a truth uncovered or a lie exposed. Dialectic does not flatter. It dismantles. It peels away the inherited, the repeated, the unexamined. And in that stripping, it offers something rare: clarity. But dialectic is dangerous. It threatens the comfortable. It reveals that many of our so-called convictions are stitched together from fear, imitation, or pride. To enter dialectic sincerely is to risk discovering that the self you defend is built on sand. And yet, only through that risk does the real begin to emerge. The soul becomes sharper. The thought becomes cleaner. The truth becomes less about possession and more about pursuit. Dialectic is not noise. It is not argument for sport. It is sacred confrontation. And in every moment where two minds face each other honestly, without performance, without fear, something ancient stirs. The Logos awakens, and the truth steps forward, not as a weapon, but as a light.